The ridge came apart under Nayu's boots and she went down on one knee. And that was how she first saw the hollow, from the ground low, the way prey sees a killing floor. Below her, in a bowl of blue frost, the pack lay in a ring, 6 of them. Great gray shapes half sunk in the snow, motionless, their pale manes crusted with rime, arranged around a low dark mound at the center of the ring the way stones are arranged around a fire. Nothing in the hollow moved. No breath steamed. No ear turned. The Sethkin lay as still as the boulders they resembled, and the thing they had ringed did not move either. "There," said Warden Hallex behind her, and his voice had the flat satisfaction of a man whose paperwork had just been confirmed. "That is the site. That mound is your Cadet Ross." Nayu did not get up right away. She stayed on her knee at the lip of the ridge and made herself look, because looking was the whole reason she had signed onto a detail she had been ordered to avoid, and because if she did not look now, she would spend the rest of her service imagining it worse than it was. The mound was the length of a person. That was all she could tell from here. Snow had drifted over it and hides had been dragged across it. No, not dragged, arranged, the same unnerving arrangement as the beasts themselves. And around it the 6 apex predators lay like a closed fist. "Playing dead," said the tracker Vess, crouched to Nayu's left with 2 of his lenses on the hollow and 2 on his scope. "Sethkin do it after a heavy kill. They gorge, they den down over the carcass, they go still. You can walk a herd past a dozing pack and never know it's there until it's inside you." He spat to the side, a Varith habit, ash-colored against the snow. "They're not asleep. They're waiting to see what we are." "What we are," said Hallex, "is the party that ends them." Nayu closed her outer lenses and opened them again. 31 days. That was how long the file on Ezra Ross had been marked closed. 31 days since the storm on the 9th night of the reckoning had swallowed his transponder. Since the recovery drones had come back with images of a torn shelter and dark stains in the churned snow. Since Warden Hallex had entered the words "killed" predation into the trial log, and sealed it with the authority of a man who did not like to leave a column blank. She had not believed it then. She did not entirely believe it now, kneeling above the proof of it, and she could not have said why except that the arrangement of the hollow was wrong. Sethkin did not den around a carcass in a ring. They denned in a heap, warmth against warmth, muzzle to flank. This was a circle with a center. This was not how animals slept. This was how sentries stood. "Warden," she said, "look at the spacing." "I have eyes, Second Cadet." Hallex came up beside her, tall even for a Varith, his ash-gray hide plated at the shoulders where rank and old scarring overlapped, his 4 lenses set in a face that had decided everything it intended to decide before the shuttle had ever touched down. He carried the long culling rifle broken open over his forearm, the way a man carries a tool he has used often enough to hold gently. "The spacing tells me they fed and denned. It tells me they are fat and slow. It tells me this will be simple." He looked down at her, and there was something almost kind in it, which was worse than contempt. "You wanted to come. You were told what you would see. Now you see it. When we are done here you will have your marker to plant, and the cadet will have his rights, and this pack will not take another of ours. That is the whole of today. Do not make it more." "He was my file partner," Nayu said. "I know what he was. You closed the trial on the 9th night. The storm cleared on the 11th. You never sent a ground party." She kept her voice level, which took everything she had. "You logged him dead, and you never once walked down there to be sure." For a moment the warden's lenses all turned on her at once, which in a Varith was the equivalent of a hand closing. Then he looked back at the hollow, and the moment passed into the cold. "There was blood on the snow the size of a body," he said. "There was no transponder, no signal, no answer on any band for 31 days. There was a Sethkin pack in a 50-length radius. I did not need to walk down there. I needed to not lose a second cadet to a storm chasing the corpse of the first." He snapped the culling rifle closed. The sound went out across the hollow, small and hard, and rolled back off the far wall. "Vess, Wind and count. Wind's downslope, Warden, it's carrying us away from them, that's a gift. Vess panned his scope slow across the ring. Count is 6. One big female, that's the dam, she's the far one with the split ear. 2 subadults flanking. 3 whelps tucked in tight against the center mound. He paused. His outer lenses widened a fraction. That's a young pack, that's a breeding pack. Warden, a breeding pack does not den on a stranger's kill and let the whelps sleep against it. Whelps sleep against the dam. Then the dam is on the mound, Halleck said. The dam is the far one with the split ear. I'm looking at her. Halleck did not answer. Below, nothing moved. The frost held its blue light. 6 great predators lay in their ring and the mound lay at the center of it. And Nayu, watching, saw the thing that made the back of her neck go tight, saw it and did not say it, because saying it would make the warden lift his rifle faster. The mound was breathing. Not much. Not the deep bellows heave of a sleeping beast. A small, slow rise and fall under the arranged hides, the size of a person's chest, once every long count. She watched it 3 times to be sure the cold wasn't playing tricks with the light. Rise, long stillness. Fall, rise. Warden, she said very quietly, it's breathing. Predators breathe, second cadet. Not the pack, the mound. She turned her head just enough to put one lens on him. The center, the thing you told me is Ezra's body, it's breathing. That reached him. She saw it reach him, saw the smallest hesitation move through the plated shoulders, the kind of hesitation a man permits himself only when no one is watching except she was watching and he knew it. He raised his own scope. He found the mound. He held on it. The hollow breathed once more, slow under the hides. A gut fills with gas as it rots, Halleck said. It shifts, it settles. It looks like breath to a grieving eye. But he did not lower the scope, and his voice had lost the flat certainty it had carried up the ridge, and that loss was the first crack Nayu had seen in him in 31 days. 31 days of rot in this cold and you'd have bone, said Vess without heat, the way a tracker states a fact that has just ruined his afternoon. You'd have scatter. You'd have a skull and a boot and whatever the whelps didn't want. You would not have a mound the shape of a whole person, arranged with the hides pulled square. He lowered his scope and looked at the warden with all 4 lenses. I've culled Sethkin for 20 years. I have never in my life seen a pack keep a thing whole. Then what is it? Halleck said, and it was not quite a question. I don't know what it is, Vess said. But I know it isn't a 31-day-old carcass, and I know that dam has been awake since the second you snapped that rifle shut, and I know she's got her whelps between her body and that mound and not the other way round. And Warden, in 20 years the only time I have ever seen a predator put its young between itself, and the thing it's guarding is when the thing it's guarding is the young's whole reason to be warm. The wind shifted a half point. Down in the hollow, the far gray shape with the split ear lifted its head. It did not lift the head the way a startled animal lifts a head, that fast snap toward a threat. It lifted slowly, deliberately, the great pale-maned skull rising out of the snow until the amber eyes cleared the drift, and those eyes went straight up the ridge and found the 3 of them where they crouched against the sky and held. Nayu had been told her whole life that you never let an apex predator catch your gaze. She had it drilled into her at the workaledge until it was reflex, drop the lenses, go soft, give the beast nothing to read. She held the dam's eyes anyway. She could not have looked away if the warden had ordered it. There was nothing stupid in that amber stare, nothing of the blank hunger the culling manuals promised. There was a decision being made behind it. There was a mind measuring 3 armed strangers on a ridge and deciding, with great patience, exactly how much it was willing to allow. She's ranging us, Vess breathed. Warden, she's ranging us the way I range them. Get down, Halleck said, both of you below the line. He was already sliding back off the crest, culling rifle coming up, and for the first time since the shuttle Nayu heard the thing under his command voice that he had spent 31 days pretending he did not feel, which was fear. We do this from cover. We do this clean. Vess, you take the dam first. A breeding pack scatters without the dam. Second Cadet, you do not touch a weapon. You are here to observe and to plant a marker and nothing else. Is that understood? It moved, Neyu said. I said get down. Warden, the mound moved. He stopped. All three of them stopped, froze in half below the crest and looked. Down in the hollow, the arranged hides had shifted. Not settled, shifted, pushed from within, one square of hide sliding sideways off the top of the mound as something beneath it turned over. One of the whelps tucked against the center made a small sound, a churring, questioning sound that carried thin and clear up the frozen bowl, and pressed its blunt face against the hides, and the mound moved again, and a hand came out of it. A hand, 5 fingers, gray-blue with cold and wrapped to the knuckle in strips of cured hide, but a hand, a person's hand, and it did not claw or flail. It reached up, found the whelp's mane and settled there, gentled it. The churring stopped. Nobody on the ridge said anything at all. The hand stroked the whelp once, twice, the way you would quiet a frightened thing you loved, and then the hides at the head of the mound pushed back, and the pack's ring did not tighten and did not break, and a young man sat up out of the snow at the center of 6 apex predators and put his other hand up to shield his eyes against the light he had not seen in 31 days. He was thin, that was the first thing. Thin the way a person gets who has been eating what the cold allows and not one bite more. His cheeks hollowed under a ragged growth of beard that no cadet was permitted at the work-a-ledge. His cadet blacks gone to rags and re-sewn with sinew and patched with hide until they were more the pack's work than the quartermaster's. Frost had silvered his eyebrows. His lips were cracked. He looked, Neyu thought, like something the mountain had kept and not quite finished with, and then he lowered the hand from his eyes, and he was, unmistakably, under all of it, Ezra Ross. Second Cadet Halleck said. His voice had gone strange. Do not move. Ezra Ross looked up the ridge at the 3 shapes against the sky. He did not startle. He did not cry out, or weep, or throw up his hands and stumble toward rescue the way 31 days alone in Predator country should have sent any cadet stumbling. He sat in the middle of the pack with a whelp's face pressed to his side, and he looked at them for a long, level moment. And Neyu had the sudden vertiginous sense that they were the ones being decided about, that the ridge and the rifles and the 3 of them were the intrusion, and the boy in the snow was weighing whether to permit it. Then he set his hand flat on the snow, a small motion, unhurried, the flat of the palm pressed down, and around him in the same instant, all 6 Sethkin came up off the ground. They did not lunge. That was what turned Neyu's blood to water. They did not lunge, they rose, all 6 of them at once, in a single fluid motion so perfectly matched it could not have been chance, the 2 subadults sliding out to the flanks, the split-eared dam pivoting to face the ridge full-on, the 3 whelps folding in behind the boy's back, and then they were still again. 6 apex predators standing in a curved wall of muscle and rimed fur between the young man and the guns, and every amber eye was on the crest. They formed up, Vess whispered. He had gone the color of old ash. Warden, they formed up on him. That's not a pack over a kill. That's a pack over its own. Halleck Sorrel raised the culling rifle. Warden, don't, Neyu started, and got a hand on the barrel, and he threw her off with a sweep of his arm that put her down hard in the snow. And down in the hollow, the dam's head dropped low, and a sound came out of the 6 of them that Neyu felt in the bones of her jaw before she heard it. A sound with no top and no bottom. The sound the world makes right before it decides you have been alive long enough. Ezzy. The word came up the ridge, cracked and quiet and human, and the sound stopped. Ezra Ross had lifted one hand. Just that. Not toward the pack, not a command flung at them, more the way a man puts his hand up to steady a door in the wind, palm out, low, patient. And the dam's head came up out of its killing drop, and the terrible sound folded back down into the 6 great chests and went quiet, and the pack held its wall but did not close the distance, and the boy at the center of it looked up the ridge at the warden with the rifle, and spoke again, in a voice gone rusty from a month of using it on no one but the beasts. Halleck's just the name, no rank. You came back. The warden's rifle did not lower. But it did not fire, either, and up on the crest, with the snow soaking cold through her blacks, Nayu understood that the whole of today had just become something very much more than a marker planted over a grave, and that whatever it became now, none of them were leaving this hollow the same. For the space of 10 heartbeats nobody in the hollow moved except the wind. The warden held his rifle on the dam. The dam held her wall on the ridge. Ezra Ross sat in the snow at the center of both, one hand still raised, and the 3 whelps behind him peered around his ribs at the strangers with the bright, incautious curiosity of the very young, and one of them chirred again, and Ezra's raised hand made a small flattening gesture in the air down, quiet, and the whelp subsided. "That is not the cadet," Halleck said. He said it to Vess, low, the way a man says a thing he needs another man to agree with. "That is a Waring. The pack has him. Look at the eyes. 31 days in a den, no one comes back from that as themselves. They have broken him, and they are using his voice." "His eyes are fine, Warden," Vess said. He had not raised his own weapon. He was crouched very still with all 4 lenses on the young man in the snow, and an expression on his ash-gray face that Nayu had never seen on the old tracker before, the expression of a man watching a rule he has staked his life on come apart in front of him. "His eyes are the clearest thing in this hollow. That boy knows exactly where he is. That boy knew your name." "Because they have him." "Because he remembers you," Vess said. "Warden, in 20 years I have culled 40 Sethkin. I have never once had a pack put a wall between me and a human. I have watched them tear open a harvester's cab to get at the driver. I have seen what they do to the things they catch. They do not keep, they do not guard, they do not form up on a man," he swallowed, "and they just did all 3. Nayu got herself off her back and up onto her knees, slower this time, both hands open and empty and low where the pack could see them. She did not know if a Sethkin read open hands. She was betting her life that this one did. Down in the hollow, the dam's amber eyes tracked to her the instant she moved, and the great split-eared head lowered a fraction, and Nayu froze with her hands spread and her heart going like a drum. "Ezra," she called down. Her voice broke on the second syllable and she hated it and pushed through. "Ezra, it's Nayu. It's Nayu from bunk row 9. Do you?" "I know who you are." The young man's cracked voice came up level and warm, and it undid something in her chest that 31 days of official grief had cauterized shut. "You used to hum in your sleep, drove the whole row mad." A pause, something that in another face, another life might have been the start of a smile. "It's good to hear you, Nayu. Tell the warden to point that thing at the ground." "Warden," Nayu said, "please." "I will not lower a weapon in the open with 6 apex predators inside a killing radius," Halleck said, on the word of a thing wearing a cadet's face. But his voice had begun to fray at the edges, because Vess was right and he knew Vess was right, and a Varith of his rank had not survived to wear those shoulder plates by being unable to read a hollow. "Ross, if you are in there, if any part of you is in there, come up the ridge, walk away from them. Come to us and we will take you home and we will end them and it will be over and none of this will have happened. Walk up the hill, cadet. That is an order." Down in the snow, Ezra Ross went very quiet. Then he did the thing that Nayu would tell and retell for the rest of her life. The thing that no drill and no manual and no 31-day-old file had prepared any of them for. He reached out slow, and he laid his hand on the split-eared dam's shoulder, laid it flat against the killing muscle of an apex predator the way you would lay a hand on the shoulder of an old friend to keep him from rising. And the dam, who had been ranging armed strangers on a ridge with murder folded into her chest, turned her enormous head and pressed her muzzle, once briefly, into the young man's thin ribs. "No," Ezra said. "Cadet, you want me to walk up the hill and leave them so you can shoot them." His voice did not rise. That was the terrible part. Nayu thought none of it rose. "You want me to trade them for a ride home. Halleck's, this pack pulled me out of the storm on the 9th night." This dam carried me 2,000 lengths in her mouth with my leg broken and my shelter gone and my transponder in pieces, carried me like she'd carry a whelp, and denned me in her own body for 9 days while the bone knit, and I have watched her go 2 days without eating so the young ones and I could. He stroked the dam's shoulder once. I am not going to walk up a hill and stand aside while you put her down for the crime of keeping me alive. So no, that is my answer to your order. No. The wind moved across the hollow. High up unseen, something with wings called once and went quiet. That's impossible, Halleck said, but the certainty had drained clean out of it. A Sethkin does not. You keep saying what a Sethkin does not do. Ezra tipped his head back to look up the ridge, and the frost-silvered brows drew down, and for the first time there was an edge under the warmth, an edge honed on 31 days of finding out exactly how wrong the manuals were. You wrote KILLED predation in a log on the 9th night, and you closed the file on me. I heard the drones. I was under a shelf of rock with my leg splinted in Sethkin sinew, and I heard your drones come over on the 11th morning after the storm broke, and I waved, and I shouted, and they turned around and went home, because you had already decided what a human does and does not survive out here, same as you've decided what a Sethkin does and does not do. You've been wrong about both for 31 days, Warden. You're standing on a ridge being wrong about both right now. Nayu watched the words land on Halleck's sorrel, and she watched him have nowhere to put them. I sent the drones on the 11th, he said. It came out of him almost without his permission. 2 of them, low pass north to south along the creek line. I counted them. I had a lot of time to count things. Ezra's hand had not left the dam's shoulder. You didn't send them to find me. You sent them to confirm me. There's a difference, and out here 31 days deep, the difference is my whole life. Vess lowered his weapon. He did it slowly, deliberately, holding it out from his body with 2 fingers so that every lens in the hollow could see the barrel go down, and then he set it in the snow at his feet and stood up empty-handed on the crest of the ridge, an old tracker with 40 culls behind him, in full view of the pack he had spent his life ending. Vess, Halleck said, pick that up. 20 years, Vess said, not looking at him. 20 years I've told the young ones the same 3 things. A Sethkin does not keep. A Sethkin does not guard. A Sethkin does not form up on a man. He shook his head slowly. I taught those 3 things at the Workelage, Warden. I taught them to that boy down there 2 seasons ago in a lecture hall. And he went out into the reckoning, and the mountain taught him better in 9 nights than I taught him in a year. And I am not going to stand on this ridge and put a bolt through the living proof that I was wrong. He nodded down at the hollow, at the young man and the wall of gray. Look at the dam's feet. Nayu looked. The split-tiered dam had shifted her stance while they argued, and where before she had stood square between the boy and the guns, now she had angled her body so that her flank curved in against Ezra's back, half shielding the 3 whelps behind him, and her weight had come forward onto the balls of her feet. She's not going to charge, Vess said. She's going to receive. If a bolt comes off this ridge, she's going to take it in her own body before it reaches him. She has already decided that. She decided it before we got here. That is what the ring was, Warden. That is what we walked up on. He turned his 4 lenses on his commanding officer, and his voice went quiet and hard. That was not a pack sleeping off a kill. That was a pack standing watch. They've been standing that watch for 31 days, and you were going to shoot them in their sleep. Something happened in Halleck's sorrel's face, then that Nayu did not have a word for. It was not shame. Not yet. Shame would come later, and it would come all the way down, but it had not arrived yet. This was the thing that comes before shame. The moment a man feels the floor of his certainty flex under his weight and understands, in his body before his mind will allow it, that it is going to give. He did not lower the rifle, but he did not raise it either. He stood on the crest with the weapon at the half, caught between the log he had signed and the boy who had survived it, and into that pause Ezra Ross climbed to his feet. It cost him. Nayu saw what it cost him. The left leg took his weight badly, and he rode it out with a hand on the dam's shoulder, and the pack flowed with him as he rose, not scattering, not startling, adjusting, the whole six-bodied shape of them reforming around his new height like water finding its level around a stone. He stood in the middle of them, thin and ragged and swaying slightly, one hand on the great gray shoulder, and he was the most upright thing in the hollow. "I'll make you a trade," he said, "a real one. Not the walk-up-the-hill one." "Cadets do not make trades with wardens," Halleck said, but it was reflex, the last dry twitch of an authority that had already died. "This one does." Ezra's cracked mouth did move now, and it was not quite a smile, it was harder and older than a smile. "Come down. Rifle stays up top with Vesses. You come down into the hollow, alone, unarmed, and you let them decide about you the way you were going to decide about them. You stand in front of the dam and you let her range you. If she lets you stand, you'll have your answer about what's real down here and what isn't. And then we'll all go home, them too. That's the trade. You risk what you were going to make them risk. And if she does not let me stand, then you'll have found out something true about the world," Ezra said. "In the last second you had to learn it, but she will. I'll be standing next to you." He paused. "I've never known her to take a thing I stood next to." Halleck Sorrell had led 11 culls in the Grethari Reach. He had walked into dens with a rifle and walked out over the bodies. He had told himself every time that the flat animal fear he felt going in was the ordinary tax a sane creature paid for entering a killing ground, and that mastering it was the whole of courage. He had never once, in 11 culls, gone in without the rifle. He looked at the weapon in his hands. He looked at the boy standing thin and unbroken in the middle of the thing every instinct in his body was screaming at him to destroy. He looked last at Neu, at the second cadet he had put down in the snow, kneeling now with her hands still spread and open, watching him with an expression he could not stand to hold. He set the culling rifle down in the snow beside Vess's. "Warden," Vess said low, "you don't have to. That's a boy's dare and you outrank it." "I closed his file on the 9th night," Halleck said. His voice had gone somewhere far back in his throat. "I sent drones to confirm a death I had already logged." He waved at them, Vess. He stood under a rock with his leg in splints and he waved at my drones and I turned them around. He started down the slope. "I am going to go and let the animal decide about me. It is the first honest thing anyone has offered me in 31 days. The slope was steeper than it looked and the frost gave way under his boots in long hissing slides, and each slide brought the wall of gray a body length closer, and every one of them felt like a mistake he was choosing to make. Halfway down, the 2 subadults on the flanks shifted to track him, their heads dropping, and a low sound started in the nearer one's chest, and Halleck's whole body locked up mid-stride with the ancient certainty that he was about to die. "Look at me," Ezra said. "Not them, me. They read where your eyes go, keep them on me and keep coming." Halleck kept his eyes on the boy and kept coming. He reached the floor of the hollow and the cold of it came up through his boots, and the smell of the pack hit him, a deep, musky, living smell, warm under all that frost, the smell of 6 great bodies that had been denned together for a month, and he stopped an arm's length from the split-tiered dam and did not know what to do with his hands. She was bigger up close than the manuals said. The manuals gave you numbers. The numbers did not tell you what it was to stand in reach of the shoulder of a thing that could take your head off with a turn of its neck, and to have it looking at you with an intelligence that was patiently, thoroughly, deciding. "Don't reach for her," Ezra said quietly, at his side now having crossed the distance in his uneven gait. "Don't talk to her. Don't do the soft voice the manuals teach. She hates the soft voice, it's what the harvester crews use right before they bring the guns up. Just stand. Let her have your smell. Let her range you." Halleck stood. The dam lowered her great head until her muzzle was level with his chest. He felt her breath come out warm across his shoulder plates, a long, slow exhalation, and draw back in, taking the measure of him, the ash of his hide, the oil of his rifle still on his hands, the fear coming off him in waves he could not stop. Her amber eyes were the size of his fists. Behind her, the three whelps had crept out from behind Ezra's legs to watch this enormous new thing their two-legged packmate had brought down into the hollow, and one of them, bolder than the rest, came right up to Halleck's boot and sniffed it and sat down on his foot. Halleck did not move. He was afraid to breathe. He stood in the killing radius of an apex pack with a whelp sitting on his boot and the dam's breath on his throat, and he understood all at once and all the way down the thing the boy had been trying to tell him from the top of the ridge, that this was not a beast that had broken a cadet and worn his voice. This was a family, and he had come here to end it in its sleep. The dam drew back her head. She looked at Halleck for one more long moment, and then she looked at Ezra, and something passed between the boy and the beast that Halleck could not read and knew he was not meant to. And the dam turned, unhurried, and walked back 3 steps and lay down in the snow, and the terrible forward weight went out of her stance, and the 2 subadults straightened out of their crouches, and the low sound in the nearer one's chest wound down into nothing. "She let you stand," Ezra said. "Yes," Halleck said. It came out of him barely. "She won't do that twice today, so don't make her." Ezra bent, wincing on the bad leg, and scooped the whelp up off Halleck's boot, and the thing that had been ranged and lethal a moment ago tucked its blunt head under the young man's chin and made a sound like a rusted hinge going soft. "This one's the trouble. She was the runt. She's the reason I'm alive if you want the whole truth of it, but that's a long story and you're standing in the cold." Nayu came down the slope with both empty hands still held out from her body, and the pack let her, and she crossed the hollow floor to Ezra Ross and stopped in front of him and did not know, having come all this way, what a person was supposed to do. He solved it for her. He shifted the runt whelp onto one hip like a bundle of firewood and put his free arm around her shoulders and held on, and she felt how thin he was through the patched rags, all cord and bone, and she felt him shaking, just slightly, the way a person shakes who has held something up alone for a very long time and has only now been permitted to feel the weight of it. "Bunk row 9, he said against the side of her head. "I didn't think I'd hear anybody from bunk row 9 again." "You waved at drones," Nayu said. Her voice came out furious and wet. "You waved at drones and they turned around." "They did." He let her go and steadied himself and set the whelp down, and it immediately went to investigate Vess's rifle, which Vess had brought down the slope and set well away from the pack, and the old tracker made a strangled sound and moved it out of reach of the small, inquisitive jaws. "Sit down, all of you. You've walked a long way to bury me and I'm not buried, so the least I can do is tell you why." They sat in the snow at the edge of the pack's ring, the 3 Vareth and the human, and the Sethkins settled around them in the loose, warm heap that Nayu now understood was their natural sleep. The ring dissolved into a family again, with the strangers folded improbably inside it. And Ezra Ross told them how the mountain had kept him. The storm on the 9th night had taken his shelter, he said, taken it clean off the anchor pins in one long shrieking gust, and left him in the open with the temperature falling past anything a cadet's kit was rated for. He had run for the rocks and gone off a shelf he could not see in the whiteout and landed wrong, and the leg had gone, and his transponder with it, crushed under him against the stone. And he had lain there in the dark with the storm coming down, and done the arithmetic every cadet is taught to do, and never believes he will have to. And the arithmetic said he would be dead before the dawn. "That's when I heard them," he said, "over the wind. I thought, I'll be honest with you, I thought, good, at least it'll be fast, at least it won't be the cold. I'd had the same 3 lectures you all had. A Sethkin does not keep." He glanced at Vess. "No offense meant, old man." "None taken," Vess said. "Go on." "The dam found me first, split here. She stood over me in the snow and I looked up at her and I did the thing you're never supposed to do. I looked her right in the eye because I didn't have anything left to lose by it." He rubbed the whelp's mane absently as he talked. "And she didn't take me. She stood over me and she kept the wind off me with her own body for I don't know how long, an hour too. And when the worst of the storm broke she took the back of my collar in her teeth, careful, So careful. You have no idea how careful a thing like that can be when it chooses. And she dragged me under a rock shelf, and she lay down against me, and I stopped dying. Why? Halleck said. It was not a challenge now. It was a man who genuinely needed to know. Why would she? A cadet in the open is a meal. Why would the dam of a breeding pack spend her body heat on a broken alien thing in a storm? I asked myself that for about 9 days, Ezra said. I didn't have the language for it then. I do now. You want to know why? Because of her. He nodded at the runt whelp on his lap. 3 weeks before the reckoning dropped me, this one went into a crevasse. I found it on my second day out before the storm, before any of it, heard it crying down in the ice, this little rasping cry, and I had a line and I had nothing better to do with my afternoon than die of boredom on a survival trial, so I went down after it. Took me most of a day. Brought it up half frozen and I warmed it inside my jacket, and I fed it out of my own rations, and I carried it 2 days looking for a pack to give it back to, because I knew from your lectures, Vess, that a whelp smelling of human would be killed by its own kind. That's in the manual too. It is, Vess said quietly. That's in the manual too. The manual was wrong about that as well, Ezra said. I found the pack. I set the whelp down at the edge of their range and I backed off and I waited for them to smell me on it and finish it. And the dam came, and she smelled the whelp all over, and she smelled me all over the whelp, and she picked her young one up and she looked at me for a long time across that snow. He was quiet a moment. And then she didn't leave. That was the thing. She should have taken her whelp and gone. She stayed at the edge of her range and she watched me make camp all that night, and in the morning she was still there, and there was a haunch of something laid in the snow halfway between us. She'd hunted in the dark and she'd left me a share. That was 3 days before the storm. By the time the storm came and took my shelter, I wasn't a stranger to them anymore. I was the one who brought the runt back up out of the ice. They'd already decided about me. I just didn't know it yet. And the ring, Nayu said. The way we found you, the way they were lying, that wasn't sleep. No. Ezra looked around at the great gray bodies heaped loose in the snow, and his voice changed, went careful, the way a man's voice changes when he is trying to translate something that has no words in his own tongue. That's the part I can't fully explain, so I'll just tell you what I saw. When the leg was at its worst, the first 9 days, when I couldn't move, when I was down, they did a thing. They'd arrange themselves around me, in a ring. And they'd go completely still, all of them, hours at a stretch, so still you'd swear they'd died. I thought at first they were just sleeping off a feed, but they weren't sleeping. Their eyes were open. They were watching everything, every direction, and they weren't moving because moving is what draws the eye out here. Moving is what a scavenger or a rival pack ranges on from a distance. So they'd go to stone, all of them, around the one who couldn't run. He paused. There's a big scavenger out here, a thing with wings, you probably heard it earlier. It'll come down on anything that looks weak. And a pack in a heap looks like a pack, but a pack lying dead, still in a ring around something looks like 6 carcasses and a 7th, nothing worth the risk, nothing moving, nothing alive to fight for. They were hiding me in plain sight, by pretending to be dead, all of them. For as long as I needed it. The long stillness, Vess said. He said it slowly, as if the words had come to him from somewhere older than himself. Ezra looked at him. That's as good a name as any. There are old range hands, Vess said. Frontier folk, homesteaders, the ones who won't take the culling bounty no matter how lean the winter, and they've got a saying I always took for superstition. They say you can tell a guarded thing from a killed thing by whether the pack breathes. A killed thing. The pack sleeps easy, they rise and fall, you can count the breaths from a ridge. A guarded thing, he stopped, and looked up at the crest where he had crouched an hour ago and told his commanding officer this will be simple, a guarded thing, the pack holds its breath, goes to stone. Won't give itself away, not even by breathing, because the guarded one's life is worth more to them than their own comfort. The homesteaders call it the long stillness. I always thought it was a story they told to keep their children from taking pot shots at a denned pack. He shook his head slowly. We stood on that ridge, and you told me the mound was breathing and the pack was not, second cadet. And I had the answer in my own head the whole time, and I called it superstition. It's not superstition, Ezra said. It's the most loyal thing I've ever seen anything do. They held still for 31 days so that whatever came over that ridge would look down and see a dead cadet and a fat pack sleeping it off and leave. They were still doing it when you crested the ridge. They played dead so hard that the man who'd come to bury me nearly did. He reached out and put his hand flat on the split-eared dam's flank, and her ribs moved under his palm, slow and deep, in the open, unafraid, because the thing they had held their breath against for a month was sitting in the snow beside them, now talking in a human voice. They only stopped when I told them it was safe to. Halleck Sorrell sat in the snow with his rifle up on the ridge and his certainties in pieces around him and said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, it was not to argue. It was worse than that. "Ross," he said, "there's something you need to know, and there is no soft way to put it, so I am going to put it plainly because you have earned plainly." He drew a breath. "When I closed your file on the 9th night, I did not only log you dead. I filed a predation report. Standard procedure for a cadet lost to wildlife inside a trial zone. The range has to be cleared before the next reckoning drops cadets into it. A predation report with a confirmed kill triggers a cull authorization. Automatically. I signed it 31 days ago." He looked at the pack, at the whelps, at the boy. "There is a hunter team inbound to this hollow, a gunship. They are coming to collect the pack that killed a cadet, and the bounty on an apex breeding group is large enough that they will not have flown out here to be talked out of it. They think they are coming to a cull. And by my reckoning of the flight window," he tipped his head, listening, and far off under the wind, so faint it might have been the blood in Nayu's own ears, there was a sound that was not the wind, a low mechanical drone growing by the smallest degree. "They are perhaps a quarter-hour out." For a moment nobody moved. Then everybody moved at once. "Rescind it." Ezra was on his feet, the bad leg forgotten, the runt whelp spilling off his lap into the snow. "You signed it, you can rescind it. Get on your comm and tell them the cadet's alive. Tell them there's no kill to confirm. Tell them to turn around." "It is not mine to rescind." Halleck's was up too, and the comm had gone out of him, and what was underneath it was a man doing arithmetic he hated. "A cull authorization, once a hunter team is airborne on it, transfers to the team's marshal. I filed it. I do not own it anymore. The moment they lifted, it became Cull Marshal Dreve's operation, and Rogan Dreve does not turn a gunship around on a warden's word, least of all mine." He was already pulling the field comm off his harness. "But he will have to hear me say the cadet is alive. On the record. That much I can force. Vess, the ridge, I need height. This hollow will eat the signal." "It'll eat more than the signal." Vess was on his feet with his 4 lenses fixed on the far white line of the sky where the drone sound was thickening. "Warden, you're thinking about this like it's a comm problem. It's not a comm problem. Dreve's team flies range cull. You know how they work a hollow. They come in high, they range it from altitude, and the second they make a pack on the ground they engage. They do not land and take statements. They do not parley. They put the pack down from the air, and then they walk the ground to collect. By the time your voice reaches Dreve's ear telling him the cadet's alive, his gunners will already have 6 apex predators lined up in the hollow below them and a bounty ticking, and they will not hold that shot for a warden. They've never liked reading them a correction off a bad comm." He turned. "They are going to come over that ridge and see a pack. That is all they are going to see. A pack in the open, in a hollow, with the bounty on it. And they are going to fire." "Not if there's a human in the hollow," Nayu said. Everyone looked at her. "It can range a pack from altitude," she said fast, the plan assembling itself as she spoke it. "They can't range a human as a target. Cull teams have a hard interlock. You all know it. It's the first thing they teach on the gun line. The fire computer will not resolve a shot with a confirmed sapient heat signature inside the danger radius. It's a legal lock. It's the one thing bureaucracy ever built that might actually save a life today." She pointed at Ezra. "He's a confirmed sapient heat signature." If he's standing in the middle of that pack when the gunship crests the ridge, the fire computer locks. It won't resolve. Dreve physically cannot put a bolt into that hollow without putting it through a cadet, and the interlock won't let him try. You want me to stand in the middle of the pack, Ezra said, and be the reason the gun won't fire. I want you to be exactly what you already are, Neyu said. The reason the pack won't run and the reason the gun can't shoot both at once. You're the interlock. You're the only interlock that works on both sides of this. She swallowed. But it only holds if you don't move out of the danger radius, and it only holds if the pack doesn't scatter into the open where the interlock doesn't cover them. You have to keep them in. You have to keep 6 apex predators standing still in a hollow while a gunship comes down on them screaming, and you have to do it with your voice, because if even one of them breaks and runs, the computer resolves on that one and the whole thing comes apart. The drone sound had become a real sound now, a rising mechanical howl folding down over the far ridge, and the light in the hollow shivered with it, and around the 4 of them the pack was coming up out of its heap, not in the slow, deliberate rise of the ring, but fast, ears flat, head swinging toward the noise. The 2 subadults already fanning out and the dam already up on the balls of her feet with the killing weight coming forward into her shoulders. Because a Sethkin knew the sound of a gunline the way the Varath knew the sound of a rescinded certainty, and every instinct in 6 great bodies was reading the sky and getting ready to either fight it or flee it. Easy, Ezra said. The pack did not go easy. The dam's head came around to him, and there was something in the amber eyes now that had not been there when she ranged the warden, not the patient measuring, but a hard, bright urgency. The look of a mother who has heard the sound that killed her own dam and her dam's dam, and every pack that ever denned in this reach, and who wants, more than she has ever wanted anything, to take her whelps and run. Ezra knew that look. He had spent 31 days learning to read the dam's face the way he had once read the faces of his own kind, and he knew that this was the one command she did not want to obey, and that the whole of the next few minutes lived or died on whether the thing between them was strong enough to override the oldest instinct she had. He did not raise his voice. Raising his voice was the harvester trick, the thing that came right before the guns. He went low instead, and he stepped in against her, and he put both hands flat on the great gray shoulder, and he leaned his forehead against the side of her neck the way he had leaned it 100 nights in the den when the cold was worst, and he spoke into her fur where only she could hear it. I know, he said, I know what that is. I know what it's telling you. Take the young ones and run, that's the right answer, that's always been the right answer, that's how your line has stayed alive on this mountain since before there was a mountain. He pressed his forehead harder against her neck and felt the tremor running through her, the fight between the instinct and the bond. But not today. Today running is how they get you. Today the still thing is the safe thing. You taught me that. 9 days you taught me that, lying in a ring around me, holding your breath so the wings wouldn't come down. I'm asking you to do it one more time, not for a broken leg, for all of us. Hold the stillness. Hold it for me, and I swear on every share you ever left me in the snow, I will not let them take a single one of you. Above the far ridge, the gunship broke into the sky. It came over black against the white, low and fast and ugly. A range-cull hull with the bounty hooks folded under its belly and the gun blister already tracking, and the howl of it slammed down into the hollow, and the whelps screamed, high and thin, and bolted for their mother, and the dam did not run. She stood. She stood with her whelps pressing into her flanks and her mate and her subadults falling in around her, and she did the thing the boy had asked, the thing that went against every wire in her body she held, and the pack held with her. 6 great predators locking down into stillness in the open with a gunship screaming overhead, ears flat, eyes up, muscles singing to run, and not one of them ran. And in the center of them, thin and ragged and upright, one hand still flat on the dam's shoulder, stood a human heat signature that the fire computer aboard the gunship registered, resolved, and choked on. Call Marshal, I've got a lock fault. The gunner's voice tight, over a channel Hallex had spent the last 90 seconds forcing his way onto from the ridge. Fire computer won't resolve. It's reading a sapient in the danger radius dead center of the pack. It's Marshall. It's reading Vareth standard sapient, but the profile's off. It's not one of ours. Then override it. That was a new voice, gravel over the channel, flat and bored and utterly certain, and Nayu did not need Hallex's flinch to know she was hearing Call Marshal Rogan Dreve. Bounce the interlock and take the shot. There's no sapient in a cull zone, gunner. There's a heat ghost off the rocks. We flew 4 hours. The pack's in the open. Take it. Dreve. Hallex keyed his comm and his voice went out flat and hard across the channel, the voice of a warden who has finally found something worth spending his rank on. This is Field Warden Hallex Sorrel on site in the hollow. Do not override that interlock. The signature is real. The call is rescinded. There is a live cadet in that pack. A silence on the channel. Then Dreve laughed, a short, ugly, unbothered sound. Sorrel, of course it's you. 31 days ago you signed me a confirmed predation kill and a fat authorization on a Grethari breeding group, and today, with my gunship over the hollow and the bounty ranged, you're going to tell me the dead cadet's alive and standing in the middle of the man-eaters holding hands with them. Another laugh. You know what that is, Warden. That's a field warden who filed a bad report and just watched his gunship arrive to make it permanent. Deciding he'd rather cost me a bounty than let the range see, he closed a live cadet's file to save himself a search. I'm not eating your negligence, Sorrel. The authorization's mine now. It's clean. And I'm going to fly home with an Apex pack on my hooks whether or not you've cooked up a heat ghost to hide behind. Then land, Ezra said. He said it into the comm Nayu had pressed into his hand, and his voice went up the channel cracked and quiet and completely level. And on the gunship, Nayu would learn much later, 4 hunters and a marshal went still at the sound of it, because it was a human voice, unmistakably, coming off the ground in the middle of a pack they had flown 4 hours to kill. Who was that? Dreve said. Cadet Ezra Ross, 3rd Form, Kesh Reach War College. The confirmed predation kill you're carrying an authorization on. I'm the heat ghost, Marshal. I'm standing in the snow with my hand on the dam's shoulder and I'm talking to you on a warden's comm. And if that's a heat ghost to you, then your fire computer is smarter than you are because it already figured out what you're refusing to. A pause. You don't believe a human survived 31 days in a Grethari hollow. Fine. Neither did the warden. Neither did anyone. So don't believe it. Land your gunship and walk down here and disbelieve it to my face. But you fire a bolt into this hollow off an overridden interlock, and it goes on the record forever that a cull marshal knowingly resolved a shot through a confirmed sapient signature to protect a bounty. You want the pack. I understand wanting the pack. The bounty's real, your fuel's real, your 4 hours are real. But you do not want that, land. The gunship held its howling station over the hollow for 3 long seconds. Then it came down. It settled on the far lip of the hollow in a storm of blown snow, skids biting the frost, gun blisters still tracking, and the ramp dropped and the hunters came out, 4 of them, in the segmented gray culling armor of a range team, long rifles up and sweeping, and behind them, unhurried, a 5th figure, broad and scarred and bareheaded, who came down the ramp and stopped at the top of the slope and looked down into the hollow and saw what was there to be seen. And Rogan Dreve, who had culled 40 packs and buried more cadets than he could name and believed, to the marrow, that he had seen everything the Grethari Reach had to show a man, stopped dead at the top of the slope. Below him, in a bowl of blue frost, 6 apex predators stood in perfect motionless formation around a ragged human boy, and the boy had one hand raised, palm out, low and patient, and the pack that should have scattered at the gunship's howl, the pack that should have been 6 shredding bodies of panic and flight, stood as still as carved stone under the downwash, ears flat, eyes up, holding, because the boy at their center had asked them to. That's not possible, said one of the hunters. Her rifle had drifted down off her shoulder without her deciding it. "Marshal, that's a Grethari breeding group. They don't hold under a gunship. Nothing holds under a gunship. They should be scattered halfway to the tree line." "Eyes up," Dreve said, but his own voice had gone thin. "They're not looking at us," said another hunter very quietly. "Marshal, look at them. Look at the whole pack. They're not looking at us. They're looking at him. They're waiting to see what he wants them to do." Ezra Ross looked up the slope at the call marshal, and he did not lower the raised hand, because lowering it was the whole ball game, and he knew it. And he spoke across the frost in the rusted, level, unhurried voice of a young man who had run entirely out of things to be afraid of 31 days ago. "Marshal Dreve, here's where we are." He tipped his head, taking in the 4 hunters, the gunship, the folded bounty hooks. "You've got a legal problem and I've got a personal one, and they've got the same shape, so let's solve them together. Your problem is that you cannot collect a bounty on a pack that killed a cadet because the cadet is standing in front of you asking after your health. There's no kill. There's no predation. The authorization voids the second the report's corrected, and the report's being corrected right now, on the warden's comm, on the record, with your gunship's own log timestamping every word of it. You fly home with those hooks empty. That's already true. That happened the moment I stood up out of the snow. All that's left to decide is whether you fly home empty and clean, or empty and dirty. And my personal problem," he went on, and now the level voice dropped half a register, and Nayu felt the hair come up along her arms, "is that I have spent a month learning that everything I was taught about these animals is wrong. They keep. They guard. They hold their own breath to hide a broken thing they've decided is theirs, and somewhere in that month they decided I was theirs. Which means that if you send those 4 down this slope to pull me out of the middle of them so your fire computer clears, you are not going to be pointing your guns at a pack anymore, Marshal. You are going to be pointing them at a family, in front of the one member of that family who can tell them to stand down, and I want you to think hard about how much you trust me to keep telling them that, while your hunters put hands on me." Rogan Dreve stood at the top of the slope and weighed it. Nayu watched him do it. She watched the cull marshal look down into the hollow at the impossible thing and try to fit it into a shape he could still spend a bounty on, and she saw the moment he decided that he could not stand at the top of a slope in front of his own hunters and be talked down by a cadet, because a marshal who backs off a ranged pack on the word of a ghost is a marshal whose team stops flying for him. It was not about the bounty anymore, she understood. It had stopped being about the bounty the moment his hunters had lowered their rifles on their own. It was about the 4 gray armored figures on the ramp who had just watched their marshal be right about nothing. "Cadet," Dreve said, "I'm going to do you the courtesy of assuming the pack has addled you, because the alternative is that a 3rd form trainee is threatening a cull marshal with a pack of man-eaters, and I would have to log that, and it would end you worse than the storm did." He came down 2 steps. "Here is what happens. My team comes down. We put a line between you and the animals. You come out, we confirm you, we all go home, and the pack we can discuss, once you are clear of it and thinking like a Varith again instead of a whelp. But you do not get to stand in a cull zone and command me. Nobody commands me off my own gunship." He lifted his chin at the 4 on the ramp. "Bring the cadet out. Mind the interlock. Nobody fires unless it charges." "Dreve, don't," Halleck said, coming down the ridge fast. "You put armed hunters inside that ring and you will not control what happens next. I have stood where you're standing. I have felt what the dam feels, do not. You lost the right to advise me on this range 31 days ago, Warden." The 4 hunters came down the slope. They came slowly, professionally, rifles up but angled off, spreading into the loose arc a cull team uses to press a pack without cornering it, and the Sethkin felt them come. The dam's held stillness began to shiver. The subadults' heads dropped. A low sound started in the pack, the no top no bottom sound, and Ezra's hand stayed up and his voice stayed low and steady. "Hold, hold, they're not going to touch me, hold the stillness." And the pack held barely, 6 great bodies vibrating with the strain of not answering the guns walking into their ring. And the runt whelp broke. She was the youngest and the boldest and the least schooled in fear, the one who had gone into a crevasse chasing something bright 3 weeks before she had any business chasing anything. And the nearest hunter's armor had a ranging lens on the shoulder that caught the low sun and threw a coin of light bouncing across the snow. And the whelp, who was, under everything, a baby, chirped and scrambled out of the formation after the pretty light, straight toward the hunter, blunt and clumsy, and utterly without malice. The hunter saw a Sethkin whelp break from an apex pack and come at her low and fast, and she did the thing 30 years of range doctrine had wired into her hands. She brought the rifle down. 3 things happened in the same half-second, and Nayu saw all 3 and would spend years putting them back in the right order. The dam came up off the ground with a sound that flattened the snow. Every wire in her body that had wanted to run for 31 days finally, catastrophically, converted into the other thing a mother's body knows how to do. And the whole pack rose with her, an eruption of gray coming up out of stillness toward the hunter who had brought a gun down on a whelp. The hunter's finger tightened on a rifle that was now pointed at a baby, with a wall of adult apex predators exploding up behind it. And Ezra Ross crossed the ring. He should not have been able to. The leg should not have carried him. But he came off the dam's shoulder in a lurching, headlong drive, and he got there. He got his body into the one place in the hollow where a body could not survive being, between the hunter's leveled rifle and the whelp, and between the whelp and the rising pack, one hand flung out flat toward the guns and the other flung out flat toward the dam. A ragged, thin boy standing in the exact center of a massacre, with a raised hand pointed at each half of it. Still, he did not shout it at the pack. He put it under them, into the ground, into the frequency he had learned in 9 nights in a den. And the dam, one length from the hunter, with her whelp under her and murder in every muscle, checked. She checked. The whole pack checked with her, a wall of gray slamming to a halt a body length from the hunters, close enough that Nayu saw the breath of them wash the frost off the nearest hunter's faceplate, close enough that it was not a stopping so much as a held avalanche. And they held there, quivering, because the boy in the middle had said the word and put his own body in the path of the thing they were about to do. For one heartbeat, the whole hollow hung on the edge of the world. Then Ezra crouched slowly in the sliver of space between the frozen hunter and the checked pack, and he gathered the runt whelp up into his arms, and he turned his back on the 4 leveled rifles as if they were furniture, and he carried the baby back into the ring and set her down against the dam's leg, and he put his hand on the great gray shoulder, and the avalanche unmade itself. The pack came down out of its rise by degrees, the killing weight draining out of them shoulder by shoulder, until they stood again in their formation, quivering, spent, held, and the hunter who had brought her gun down on a whelp sat down abruptly in the snow, because her legs had stopped working, and put her rifle across her knees and stared at the boy who had just put his own spine between her and the thing she had woken. Nobody had fired. Nobody had died. In the whole hollow there was only the wind and the sound of 5 Vareth remembering how to breathe. "You," said the hunter in the snow, her voice came out wrecked. "You stopped them. They were coming for me and you got in front of it and you stopped them. Why would you? I had a gun on the whelp. I had a gun on the little one. Why would you stand in front of me?" "Because you were scared and you were wrong, and neither one's a killing offense," Ezra said. He did not look up from the whelp. He was checking her over with his hands, the runt squirming and chirping and entirely unbothered, having already forgotten the coin of light and the wall of teeth and everything, but the fact that her 2-legged packmate was holding her again. And because if she'd taken you, if any of them had taken you, that's what everyone flies home believing forever, that a Sethkin pack tore apart a Kull team, that the manuals were right, that they're just teeth. I've spent a month learning they're not just teeth. I'm not going to let one scared trigger finger turn them back into teeth in front of the only witnesses who will ever get to see the truth. Now he did look up, and he found Dreve at the top of the slope, and his cracked face was very calm. "That's the last time I stand between them and your guns, Marshal. I did it because a baby ran at a lens flare and your hunter panicked, and I don't hold that against her. But I want you to have seen it. I want you to have seen exactly who kept your team alive in this hollow today, because you're going to be telling this story for the rest of your life, and I want you to tell it right." Rogan Dreve did not answer. He stood at the top of the slope, and he looked at the boy and the whelp and the pack that had checked itself a hand's breadth from his hunters' throats. And Neu watched the thing happen to him that she had watched happen to Hallex an hour before, the floor of a lifetime certainty flexing and giving way. Except that where it had made Hallex quiet, it made Dreve furious, because a man like Dreve could not survive being wrong in front of the people he commanded. And the only tool he had for the terror of it was the tool he had always used. "Get back on the ship," he told his hunters, "all 4 of you now." "Marshal." "On the ship." He turned to go himself and stopped and looked back down into the hollow one last time, and when he spoke his gravel voice had gone tight and small. "The report's yours, Sorrel. Correct it. Void the authorization. I'll not carry a cull I can't collect, and I'll not be the marshal who fired through a cadet, whatever else I am." A muscle worked in his scarred jaw. "But you tell them all, when you get home and they ask how it went out here, you tell them the truth as it happened and not 1 degree warmer. You tell them a field warden closed a live cadet's file to save himself a search. You tell them a boy in the middle of a man-eater pack put himself in front of my hunter's rifle to save the life of the fool who leveled it. And you leave my name in it, wherever it belongs. I'll not have it said I flew home and scrubbed the log." He drew himself up, and it cost him, and it was, Neu thought, the single least dishonorable thing she would ever see the man do. "That's the only clean thing left in this hollow for me to carry out of it. I'll carry that." Dreve got 3 steps up the ramp before Vess said the word that changed the shape of the day again. "Storm." He said it quietly, the way a tracker says the thing he has been half watching for an hour and hoping he was wrong about. And every Varith in the hollow turned to follow his 4 lenses to the northwest, where the sky over the far ridges had gone the particular flat, dirty, luminous white that a Grethari cold front wears in the hour before it eats the world. "That's the same face the sky had on the 9th night," Ezra said. He had gone still, the whelp forgotten in his arms. "That's the one that took my shelter." "It's worse than the 9th night." Vess was already reading it the way he read a pack, weight and speed and intention. 9th night was a squall. This is a front. Look at the leading edge. Look how flat it is. That's a wall of air 1,000 lengths high, and it's coming down off the Kesh shoulder with the whole cold weight of the range behind it. He turned to Dreve on the ramp. "Marshal, you are not flying out ahead of that. Nobody flies out ahead of that. If you lift now, it catches you over the ridges with no ground reference, and it puts you into a slope at 200, and I have scraped enough gunships off enough slopes to tell you exactly how that ends. That thing is going to be on this hollow in under the quarter hour it took you to get down here, and when it is, there is no up. There is no out. There is only down and still and low, and staying that way until it passes." "How long does it pass in?" said the hunter, still sitting in the snow. "A front like that, off the shoulder in winter," Vess shook his head. "Not before dark. Maybe not before the dark after that." And so it was that Cull Marshal Rogan Dreve, who had flown 4 hours to end the pack in the hollow, came back down his own ramp with the storm at his back, and found that the only shelter for 1,000 lengths in any direction was the one thing he had come to kill. Neu would think later that she had never seen anything reorganize a group of proud creatures as fast as a Grethari front coming over the ridge. The gunship was steel, and it was warm inside, and it had power, and for about 90 seconds that seemed like the answer, until Vess pointed out flatly that a hull sitting exposed on the lip of a hollow in a full front becomes a sail, and then a coffin, that the wind would either roll it or strip the heat out of it faster than its cells could feed the exchangers, and that the men who survived Grethari fronts were never the ones who trusted their machines. The men who survived were the ones who got low, got out of the wind, and did not move. Down in the hollow, Vess said, under the rock shelf on the lee side where the cadet denned, out of the wind's throat, all of us. With the pack, said a hunter. With the pack, Ezra said, or without a warning. Picking. The front came over the ridge like a lid closing. There was no dusk to it, no gradual failing of the light. One moment the hollow lay blue and clear under a low sun, and the next the wall of white arrived, and the sun was a rumor, and the far side of the bowl was gone, and the wind came down into the hollow with a sound like the mountain grinding its teeth. The cold that rode in on it was not the cold Nayu had walked up the ridge in. It was a different order of thing, a cold with weight and appetite, and it found the seams of her cold weather blacks in seconds and began, methodically, to take her apart. They got under the shelf. It was not large. It was a shelf of dark rock leaning out over a hollowed pocket where the wind curled instead of cutting, the den where a boy had knit a broken leg for 9 days, and it was meant for one broken cadet and a pack, and now it had to take 8 Vareth as well, and it should not have worked. It worked because the pack made it work. Ezra spoke to the dam, low, in the frequency under words, and the split-tiered dam looked at the huddle of shivering, armored strangers her packmate was gathering into her den. And she did not like it. Nayu could see she did not like it, and she did it anyway, because the boy had asked. She lay down along the open lee edge. The wind sighed, her great body a windbreak of muscle and dense frost-shedding fur, and the 2 subadults folded in against her, and the whelps tucked into the warm pocket at the back, and into the space between the pack and the rock, out of the wind's throat, the boy waved the Vareth. Get in against them, he said. Against the fur. I know what you were taught. Forget it for one night. The armor holds no heat, the fur holds all of it, and they will not touch you. Get in against them and get low and go still, and you'll see the morning. Nobody moved. 8 range-hardened Vareth, 4 of them hunters who culled Sethkin for a living, stood in the roaring cold and could not make their bodies lie down against the flank of an apex predator. Dreve went first. Nayu never forgot it. The Cull Marshal, who had killed 40 packs, walked into the den with the storm shrieking at his back and lowered himself, stiff, furious, terrified, down into the snow against the flank of the split-eared dam, the dam whose whole family he had flown out to hang on his bounty hooks, and the dam turned her great head and looked at him along her own shoulder, and for a long moment the 2 apex things measured each other in the dark, the marshal and the mother, and then she looked away and let him stay. And Rogan Dreve pressed his scarred face into the fur of the animal he had come to kill and shook, whether from cold or from the thing that was happening to him Nayu could not tell, and probably neither could he. After that the rest of them came. They packed into the den, Vareth and Sethkin folded together against the rock, and the pack's heat came up around them like a tide, a deep animal warmth that had kept a broken boy alive through 9 nights and now spread itself, grudging and enormous, over 8 strangers besides. Nayu found herself wedged between Vess and the warm barrel of a subadult's ribcage that rose and fell against her back, slow and vast, and across the den in the dark, she could see Ezra with the runt whelp asleep on his chest and his hand on the dam's neck, and the storm went over the top of them all, screaming, and could not get in. There's a thing that hunts in this, Ezra said into the dark, when the shaking had gone out of them and the warmth had done its work and the den had become, impossibly, almost bearable. You'll hear it if the wind drops a second. Big wings. The scavenger. It comes down the fronts because everything that's caught in the open goes still to survive, and a still thing looks like a dead thing, and a dead thing is a meal. It came down on us twice in the 9 days. Both times the pack did the same thing they did for you when you crested the ridge. His voice was quiet, unhurried, the voice of a young man who had learned all this the only way it can be learned. They went to the long stillness. All of them over me, over the whelps flat, silent, not one breath given away. 6 apex predators pretending to be 6 frozen carcasses and a dead cadet, so that the thing with the wings would look down into the hollow and see nothing worth the stoop, and go on down the front to easier ground. They held their own breath to hide us. That's the thing I keep trying to make you understand. That's what you flew 4 hours to kill. The wind dropped once deep in the night, the way a storm will pause to draw a breath, and in the sudden hollow silence they heard it, the thing with the wings, high up and off to the north, a slow heavy beat and a long descending cry that went through the den like cold water. Every hunter's hand went to a weapon. And the pack, without a sound, without being asked, went to stone. Nayu felt it happen against her back. The subadult she was wedged against, that warm, slow rise and fall she had half forgotten she was leaning on, simply stopped. The breath went out of it and did not come back in, and the great body under her went rigid and silent and utterly still. And all around the den, the same thing rolled through the pack in an instant, 6 great animals holding their own breath in the dark with 8 Vareth and a boy tucked inside them. And Ezra's hand made the smallest flattening motion in the black, and his voice came out at the very floor of hearing. Don't move, don't breathe loud, let them do it. This is the thing they're best at in all the world. They held the long stillness together. The winged thing came down the front. They heard it pass over the hollow, the beat of it, the weight of it, close enough that a hunter whimpered and Dreve's hand closed hard on the hunter's arm to still her, and it circled once low, ranging the white bowl below for anything worth the stoop, and it found 6 frozen carcasses and a scatter of steel and nothing moving, nothing breathing, nothing alive to fight for, and it beat on down the front toward easier ground, and its cry faded and was gone. The subadult against Nayu's back drew breath again. The pack came off the stillness, and in the dark somebody let out a long shaking sound that was half a laugh and half something with no name, and it was, Nayu realized, the hunter who had leveled her rifle on the whelp. They hid us, the hunter said. They hid all of us from that. They put themselves flat and cold in the dark and hid a gunship crew from the thing that hunts the fronts, and they never even, her voice broke. I put a gun on the little one. You did, Ezra said. And they hid you anyway. That's the part you're going to have the rest of your life to sit with. They don't keep a scoreboard. Once they decide you're inside, even the fool who leveled a rifle, especially the fool. That's what inside means. Toward the coldest hour, when the storm had settled into its long grinding middle, and there was nothing to do but endure it, the runt whelp began to fret. It was too small to hold a stillness for long and too young to understand why the world was screaming, and it whimpered and squirmed on Ezra's chest, and he shifted it up under his chin, and lo, under the wind, he began to hum. It was a plain tune. 4 notes up and down, the kind of thing a person hums without deciding to, and Nayu knew it, and the knowing of it went into her like a blade because it was hers. It was the tune she hummed in her sleep, the one that had driven Bunk Row 9 mad, the one Ezra had teased her about not 2 hours and a whole lifetime ago at the top of the ridge. He had carried it out here. He had carried her sleeping hum into a Grethari winter, and hummed it to himself through 9 nights of a broken leg to stay on the right side of the dark, and the whelps had learned it, and now, in the roaring black one by one, the pack took it up. Not the tune, they had no voice for the tune. But the rhythm of it, a low, deep, rhythmic thrum that started in the dam's chest and spread to the subadults and rolled around the den in the dark. 6 great bodies humming the shape of a cadet's sleeping song back to the whelp who fretted. A sound with no top and no bottom. But this time not the killing sound, the other one, the keeping one. A thrum you felt in the bones of your jaw and understood without being told meant safe, meant held, meant still here, still breathing, still yours. Vess wept in the dark. Nayu heard him do it, the old tracker who had culled 40 packs, and she did not say anything because she was doing it too. There ought to be a name for that, Dreve said after a long time. His gravel voice came out of the black rough and slow and stripped of everything it had flown in wearing. In the range doctrine, 20 years I've flown the culls and there is no line in any manual for the sound a pack makes when it has decided to keep you. We have 40 words for the sound before they charge. We have none for this. He was quiet a moment. There should be a name. So the next crew that comes out here knows what they're hearing before they raise a gun to it. The keeping song, Vess said from the dark thick. Call it the keeping song, and I'll put it in the doctrine myself, and I'll teach it in the same hall I taught them a Sethkin does not keep, and I will stand up in front of the third form and say I was wrong. It was Dreve who broke the long quiet after that, and the thing he asked came out of him slow, as if it had been working its way up through him all night. The little one, he said, you said the whelp's the reason you're alive. You keep saying it and you keep not finishing it. A crevasse and a rescue, that's how it started, I heard that part. But there's more to it than a rescue, or you'd not keep coming back to it with that look. What did she cost you? What did keeping you cost them? He shifted in the dark against the dam's flank. I've flown out here to end 40 packs, Cadet. I've read 40 predation files. I have never once had to wonder what the pack paid to keep the thing it was guarding. So tell me, I've a right to know what I flew 4 hours to kill. Ezra was quiet a while, and when he spoke it was lower, and the warmth had gone careful in it. Around the 15th day, he said, there was another pack. A ranging pair, 2 big males off the far shoulder, come down into the range following the thaw herds early, the way rogue males do when their own ground's gone thin. And they smelled me. A hurt thing down, alone in a den, that's the easiest meal on the whole mountain, and they came for it. And I was flat on my back with a leg I couldn't stand on and a knife I could barely lift. And I did the arithmetic again, and the arithmetic said the same thing it said the 9th night. He drew a breath. And Warden, the dam, she'd taken the young ones out to hunt. She wasn't in the den. It was just me and the 2 subadults, left and right, half-grown, not a season past whelps themselves, and 2 full rogue males coming up the draw. I told them to run. I actually said it out loud in the dark to 2 animals that couldn't understand a word. Go, run, get out, I'm not worth it. And they didn't run. He stopped. In the dark, one of the whelps chirred in its sleep, and he gentled it without seeming to notice. I'm not going to tell you what happened next in the draw. It happened out of my sight, and I was glad of it, and I'll not turn it into a story to shock a gunship crew in the dark. I'll only tell you what I saw after. I saw 2 half-grown Sethkin who should have run come back up into that den at first light, torn, one of them dragging a leg worse than mine, and lie down against me and go to the stillness, still watching the draw, still between me and it, in case the rogues came back. 2 babies. They spent themselves down to the bone against 2 full males, for a broken alien thing that told them to run, and then they came back and stood watch over it, hurt worse than it was. His voice had gone rough. The rogues didn't come back. And when the dam brought the young ones home that evening, she went straight to left and right and smelled every wound on them. And then she came to me, and she put her muzzle on my chest, the way she does. And I swear to you, Marshal, in the whole of my life nothing has ever been said to me as plainly as that was said, without a single word. She was telling me the price had been paid and the accounting was closed, and I was packed now, all the way, bought and kept, and there was no walking it back for either of us. That's what the little one cost them. That's what keeping me cost. I've been trying to be worth it every day since, and I don't expect I ever will be, and that's all right. You don't get out of a debt like that by paying it. You get to carry it. That's the whole gift. Nobody in the den said anything for a long time. The wind ground on overhead, and somewhere in the dark Dreve made a low sound that was not a word, the sound of the last thing in a hard man coming quietly down. Nobody slept, not truly, but the night went soft around the edges for a while, the way even the worst nights will when the cold has been beaten back, and there is warmth and there is company, and the thing that hunts the fronts has passed on by. And in that softness, in the dark, with his back against the flank of a dam he had come to kill, Halleck Sorrel told the boy why he had closed the file. 2 seasons ago there was a warden named Corin, he said. Ran the reckoning before me, good man, better than me. He had a cadet go dark in a front on the far range, and he did the thing you'd want a warden to do, the thing that sounds like honor when you say it in a warm hall. He sent a search. In the storm, 5 went out after the one. He stopped. The wind filled the gap. They found the cadet's body in the spring melt, 40 lengths from a shelter he could have reached. And they never found 3 of the 5 who went after him. The front took them, Corin included, 6 dead, chasing one who was already gone. His voice was very flat. I took his post, and I took the lesson everyone in that college took, the one nobody says out loud, that the dead are dead, and you do not spend the living chasing them into the weather, and the fastest way to be sure you never lose a search team is to never send one. Close the file. Sign the report. Protect the ones you can still protect. I told myself that was the hard wisdom. I told myself for 31 days that leaving you was the mature thing, the responsible thing, the thing Corin was too soft to do. He was quiet a moment. And then I crested a ridge and found you'd been alive the whole time. So it turns out my hard wisdom was just fear wearing a warden's plates. I didn't leave you to protect a search team. I left you because looking would have meant risking being the next Corin, and I would rather have signed you dead than found out I was brave enough to go get you. That's the truth. You've earned the truth. I closed your file to keep myself comfortable, and I dressed it up as doctrine, and you waved at my drones. Ezra was quiet for a long time. I'm not going to tell you it's all right, he said at last. It's not. I lay under this rock for 31 days and I heard your drones turn around and I did the math on being left, same as I did the math on the cold, and it was the harder of the 2 sums. He shifted the sleeping whelp. But I'll tell you what the pack taught me, because you're the one who needs to hear it and they can't say it in words. The dam should have run the first night. Every instinct she had said run, take the young, leave the broken thing in the snow. That's the wisdom that's kept her line alive since before the mountain. And she didn't. She spent her body heat on a broken alien thing that couldn't do a single thing for her, against everything she'd ever been taught, because somewhere in her there was a thing bigger than the wisdom. You had the same choice she had, Warden. On the 11th morning, with the storm cleared, you had exactly the choice the dam had on the 9th night. She went down into the cold for a stranger. You turned your drones around. He looked across the dark at the shape of the man. That's not me condemning you. That's just the 2 sums laid side by side so you can see them. You still get to be the dam next time. That's the thing about next time. It's still open. The storm ground on. And to fill the long middle of it, because the alternative was to lie in the dark and count your own heartbeats against the cold, Ezra told them about the 31 days. He told them about the 2nd night in the den, when the pain in the leg had been so bad he'd bitten through his own lip to keep from crying out, and how the dam had lain with her spine against his, and thrummed that low keeping thrum against his back, until he'd passed into something like sleep. He told them the names he'd given them all, because a man alone gives names to the things that keep him alive. The split-eared dam he called Warden, which raised a short, unwilling bark of a laugh from Halleck's in the dark. The big scarred male he called Gray. The 2 subadults, left and right, because he'd been too tired for poetry. And the runt, the crevasse whelp, the reason for all of it, whom he'd simply called Trouble, and who answered to it now. He told them how he'd learned the frequency. Not taught, he was careful to say learned. How for the first days he'd tried the manual things, the soft voice, the slow hand, and how the pack had tolerated it the way you tolerate a well-meaning fool, and how it wasn't until he'd stopped performing calm and simply been calm, been ordinary, been a tired, hurt creature lying in a warm den with no agenda but the morning, that the dam had begun to answer him. They don't respond to command, he said. Every manual writes it up as command, the human commanding the beast, and it's wrong, it's exactly backwards. They respond to true. You can't fake it at them, they smell the fake before you finish the gesture. The soft voice is a fake. The hero voice is a fake. The only thing that ever worked was being genuinely what I was, which out here most days was scared and grateful and small. They respect that. They're apex predators, they've got nothing to prove to anybody, so they've got no patience for a thing that's proving. The dam let me stand today because I wasn't performing standing, I was just standing. He was quiet. That's the whole secret if there is one. There's no trick. You just have to actually be who you are all the way down where they can smell it. Most people can't. Most people have never once in their lives been all the way down where anyone could smell it. That's why the manuals are full of tricks. Tricks are what you write when you've never just been true in front of a thing that could kill you. The storm broke a little after first light. It did not fade so much as lift, the wind falling off between one gust and the next, until there was only a vast ringing silence, and a world scoured white and new, the hollow buried deeper, the far ridges razor clear against a sky washed to pale glass. They crawled out from under the shelf one at a time, Vareth and Sethkin both, stiff and blinking, into a cold so bright it hurt, and the pack shook the night snow off in great shuddering waves, and the whelps exploded into the fresh drifts with the boundless idiot joy of the young. And for a moment there was nothing in the hollow but light and breath, and the small violent happiness of 3 baby apex predators discovering the world had been made soft overnight. Ezra could not stand. He'd hidden it through the night in the dark, wedged in the warm, but the morning light showed it plainly. The leg had gone bad again in the cold, the month-old break that had knit crooked under a boy's own splinting, and 31 days of hunger had spent him down to something that the storm night had nearly finished. He got as far as one knee in the snow, and the dam was there, her shoulder under his arm, and he leaned on her and got no farther, and he laughed, a thin, cracked sound, and said, "Well, that's the leg voting. I think I'm done walking myself anywhere for a while." "You're not walking anywhere," Nayu said. She was already up, already moving, the numbness of the long night burning off into the sharp practical grief of seeing exactly how close a thing she loved had come. "The gunship can fly now. It's got a medical berth, every cull hull does, for the crews. Dreve," she turned and found she did not have to finish it. Dreve was already keying the hull awake from across the hollow. "Berth's warming," he said. "It'll fly. We'll have you at Kesh Reach Infirmary inside the hour, Cadet." He came back across the snow and stood over the boy and the dam, and there was a thing in his scarred face that had not been there when he came down the ramp the day before, a kind of careful, chastened attention. "But there's a matter we settle first, on the ground, before you're in a berth and drugged and it's out of your hands. Because you're going to sleep the moment that berth takes you, and when you wake it'll be in a warm bed 100 lengths up, and the pack will still be down here in the open with my authorization still live and the bounty still posted, and the next range team already able to fly out tomorrow, and do exactly what I came to do, legally, before your report even clears the clerks." He crouched, so he was level with the boy. "You saved my team a massacre, and the pack saved all our lives in the dark, and I'll be damned in every hell the range has if I fly you out of here and leave a hole in the paperwork big enough for the next Dreve to fall through. So, here, on the ground, with the warden and 3 witnesses and the hull's log running, let's close it, all the way. For good." It was Vess who knew the machinery of it in the end, because Vess had spent 20 years inside the machinery and knew where every lever was. "The bounty's the easy part," he said, crouched in the snow with his field slayed out, the old tracker suddenly all business. "A breeding group bounty pays on a confirmed predation. There's no predation, the cadet's alive, the report corrects, the bounty voids the instant it clears. Marshal Dreve flies home with empty hooks and a clean log, and any team that flies out here next season looking to collect fines, there's nothing posted to collect. That kills the money reason. But the money reason isn't the only reason, and Warden, you know it better than I do." He looked at Hallex. "The reckoning drops cadets into this range every season. As long as it does, sooner or later another cadet goes dark in another front, and another warden signs another predation report, and the pack that killed him is this pack, because this is their range, and we start the whole thing over with a different set of names. You don't save this pack by voiding one bounty. You save them by taking the range off the reckoning map. You interdict the hollow. You draw a line around it and you write protected across it, and you move the cadet drop zones 2 ranges north where the packs are thinner. That's a warden's authority. That's yours to sign, and it's the only signature that actually holds." Halleck's sorrow looked down into the hollow at the pack, at the whelps rolling in the new snow, at the boy leaning on the dam. "It'll cost me," he said. Not a refusal, a man saying the price out loud so that everyone would know he'd seen it. You don't take a range off the reckoning without a reason on the record, and the reason on the record is going to be that a field warden closed a live cadet's file and left him to a pack that turned out to have kept him alive for 31 days. I'll be signing my own negligence into the founding document of a protected range. Every clerk in the college will read it. It ends me as a warden. He was quiet. Corin's name is on a memorial wall for sending a search that killed his team. Mine will be on an interdiction order for not sending one. 2 wardens, 2 walls, opposite crimes. A short, bitter breath. The college will have a fine time with that. "You could write it soft," Dreve said. "I'd not stop you. Half of it happened in a storm with no witnesses but us, and Vess and the second cadet are yours, and I've no love of paperwork that names me either. You could write it so it lands lighter." "No," Halleck took the slate from Vess. "The boy told me last night I still get to be the dam next time. This is next time. It came faster than I expected." He looked at Ezra. "You want it written true, all the way down where they can smell it. So it'll be written true and it'll cost what it costs, and that's the whole of it." He began to key the order in, standing in the snow, his breath smoking, an old officer signing away his own career one careful line at a time. Interdiction order. Grethari Reach, Hollow 9 and a 2-range radius. Cadet drop zones relocated north of the Kesh shoulder, effective this season. Reason: confirmed sapient survival in range under apex protection, documenting a predation report error by the signing warden, that's me, in full rank and name, and establishing that the resident Sethkin group is a non-hostile protected population. He paused over the slate. "It needs a name, the population, for the record, so the next crew knows which pack the line's drawn around." "Trouble's pack," Ezra said. "The dam's warden and the male's gray and the little one's Trouble, and Trouble's the reason I'm alive, so Trouble's pack." He smiled, thin and worn. "Put that in your founding document, Halleck. Let a clerk choke on it." "Trouble's pack," Halleck said, and wrote it, and something that was almost the ghost of a smile crossed the ruin of his face. "Signed and countersigned." He held the slate out to Dreve. The call marshal looked at it for a long moment. Then he pressed his mark into it, hard, the way a man signs a thing he wants no way of ever taking back. Call Marshal Rogan Dreve, witnessing, and adding for the record that the interdicted population rendered material aid to a downed Cull crew during the front, and that any team flying against it in future flies against my mark as well as the warden's. He handed the slate back. "There. Now they'd have to come through both our names to touch them. It won't bring my bounty back and it won't buy your rank, Sorrel, but it's a wall, and it's a better use of my name than the hooks were." Nayu had the memorial marker in her pack. She had carried it up the ridge the day before to plant over a grave, a plain gray range stone, the kind the college issued for cadets lost in the field, blank but for the socket where a nameplate went. She took it out now and looked at it and looked at the boy who was not going to need it, and understood all at once what it was for instead. "Vess," she said, "your slate has a cutter for marking Cull stones." She held out the blank gray marker. "Cut this." Vess cut it while the berth warmed. He worked the cutter slow and careful, the way a man works when the thing he is making is going to outlast him. And when he was done, he set the stone upright in the snow at the lip of the hollow, where the interdiction line would run, and they read what he had put on it, deep cut into the gray range stone that had been meant to mark a boy's grave. It did not say Ezra Ross. It said, in the plain blocky range script the college used for its boundary markers, "Beyond this stone, the pack KEEPS its own. No guns CROSSES." And beneath that, smaller, the 2 words that would puzzle every clerk and every range hand and every new cadet who ever stood before it and did not know the story, the keeping song. "They'll ask what it means," Vess said, stepping back from it. "The new ones. They'll stand there and read it and not understand a word of it, and they'll come and ask an instructor, and the instructor will have to tell them the whole thing to make it make sense. which means the whole thing gets told, every season, to every form. He looked at the stone with all four lenses. That's how you really protect a pack in the end, not with a line on a map. A line on a map is just ink until somebody with a gun decides to cross it. You protect them by making sure everybody who comes out here already knows the story before they arrive. You make the truth travel faster than the next fool with a bounty. That stone'll do more than my signature ever could. He glanced at Hallex. No offense, Warden. None taken, Hallex said. It's the first true thing I've helped make in 31 days. I'll take being outdone by a rock. Then it was time. And the pack knew it was time before any of the Vareth said a word, because the berth hatch on the gunship had cycled open with a hiss and a gust of warm medical air, and the dam's head came up, and the whole easy morning went out of the hollow in an instant. They were going to take her packmate into the thing that flew. The dam came up off her haunches and put herself between Ezra and the open hatch, and the low sound started in the pack again, the no-top no-bottom sound. Because a Sethkin knew what flying things were and what they did, and this one was opening its belly to swallow the broken two-legged one she had carried in her own mouth for 2,000 lengths, and every instinct she had said no. The subadults fanned. Gray, the big scarred male, came around to the flank. And the Vareth froze where they stood, because there was no interlock for this, no legal lock. Nothing between 8 of them and the pack but a thin, ragged boy who could barely kneel. Hey, Ezra said, hey, Warden. Look at me. He got his hand up onto the dam's shoulder, and he pulled himself up her flank until he was on his feet against her, swaying, his forehead pressed to the side of her great neck the way he had 100 nights in the den, and he spoke into her fur where only she could hear it, the way he had at the top of every crisis in this hollow, low and true and all the way down. I know, he said. I know what it looks like. It's the flying thing and it's opening its mouth and every part of you is telling you it's going to take me down the front and I'll be gone, same as the storm nearly took me, same as the wings. I know. He pressed harder against her neck. But it's not that. This one's mine the way I'm yours. It's going to take me up to the warm place and mend the leg you couldn't mend. The leg that's going bad because I splinted it with sinew and a boy's guess. And if I don't let it, I'm going to lose the leg and maybe more out here this winter, and then you'll have kept me alive for 31 days just to watch the cold finish what it started. I'm not going to do that to you. You spent too much on me to watch me waste it. His voice cracked. So I need you to do the hardest thing I've ever asked you. Harder than the stillness under the gunship. I need you to let them take me. I need you to stand here and let the flying thing swallow me and lift, and not fight it, and not follow, because if you follow you'll die on a slope in the cold, and it'll all have been for nothing. I need you to let me go up. And I swear to you, I swear on every share you left me in the snow, on 9 nights of your breath in the dark, on trouble alive and warm because I went down after her, I swear I am coming back. This is your range now. There's a stone on it says so. I'm coming back to it and to you, and I'm going to walk down into this hollow on a mended leg, and you're going to smell me before you see me, and you're going to know I kept the promise. Let me go so I can keep it. The dam stood very still. Then she turned her great head, and she pressed her muzzle into the boy's thin chest, once, the way she had when the guns were on the ridge, and she held it there, and Ezra put both arms around the enormous scarred head and held it back. And for a moment there was nothing in the whole white hollow but a boy and an apex predator holding onto each other in the cold. And then she drew back, and she stepped aside. And she made a low sound, a single note, down at the floor of hearing. And the pack came off its threat, all of them, and stood down, and let the Vareth come and take their packmate to the flying thing. Neu and Ves made a chair of their arms and carried him, because he could not walk it. And the pack watched them do it, watched 8 of their enemies from the day before lift their packmate and carry him toward the flying thing's open belly, and did not move, because the dam had said stand, and they stood. Trouble did not understand standing. The runt whelp, the crevasse baby, the reason for all of it, broke from the pack for the second time in 2 days and came scrambling across the snow after the boy who was being carried away, chirping her rusted hinge cry, and got right up onto the base of the ramp before anyone could stop her, and stood there on the cold steel with her blunt head cocked and her whole small body asking the only question she had. "Where are you going? Why aren't you carrying me? I go where you go. That's the whole of what I know." "Oh," Ezra said, and his voice finally broke all the way, the thing that 31 days and a gunship and a Grethari front had not managed to break, undone at last by a baby predator standing on a ramp. "Oh no, not you. You can't come, Trouble. You most of all." Neu and Vess lowered him to the ramp and he gathered the whelp up one more time and pressed his face into her fur. "You're the one who has to stay. You're the reason there's a pack to come back to. If you come with me, you'll be a thing in a cage up at the warm place, a curiosity, a thing they study, and you'll never run a front or den a hollow or teach your own whelps the stillness, and I didn't pull you out of the ice to make you into that. You have to grow up out here and get big and mean and free. That's the only way I get to come back to something worth coming back to." He carried her back down the ramp himself on his knees, dragging the bad leg, and set her down in the snow and pointed her at the dam. "Go on. Go to Warden. Go be Trouble. I'll see you when you're bigger than Gray." The whelp looked at him. Then she turned and trotted back across the snow to the dam, and pressed in against the great gray leg, and looked back once at the boy on the ramp. And that was the moment Neu had to turn her face away, because there is only so much a person can watch. They loaded him into the berth. The medical field came up around him, warm and blue, and it took him fast, the way Dreve had said it would, the long night and the leg and the 31 days all coming due at once the moment it was safe to let them. And the last thing Ezra Ross did before the berth pulled him under was to lift one hand off the litter, that small, low, patient gesture, palm out, toward the pack in the snow. "Easy. Hold. Still here." The hatch cycled shut, the gunship lifted. Neu watched it from the ground, from the hollow, and she watched the pack watch it too. As the hull rose off the lip of the hollow and the downwash blasted the new snow into a white storm of its own, the Sethkin did not scatter, and they did not flee, and they did not go to the stillness. They formed up. The dam at the point and Gray off her shoulder, and the 2 subadults on the flanks, and the 3 whelps tucked behind. 6 apex predators standing in a wedge on the ridgeline of their own protected range. Heads up, eyes on the rising ship, watching their packmate be carried up into the pale glass sky. A formation with nothing to fight and no one to hide from, holding it anyway. The way you stand for a thing you are letting go of because standing is the only thing left to give it. The last Neu saw of them, as the gunship swung north and climbed, was the wedge on the ridge growing small and then smaller, unmoving, the dam at its point, and one tiny shape that had broken from the back of the formation to stand out front alone, watching the longest, until the whole white range folded them under distance and they were gone. Ezra Ross woke in a warm bed 100 lengths above the range, and it took him 3 days to stop flinching at the ceiling, because a boy who has slept a month under rock and fur does not easily trust a roof he cannot smell the weather through. The leg mended. They rebroke it clean and set it true and grew the bone back straight in a tank of blue medical light, and the college infirmary fed him back up from the cord and bone thing the mountain had made of him, and slowly, over weeks, he became a person who could stand in a corridor without a wall of gray fur to lean on. He hated the corridors. He said as much to Neu, who came every day. "Too straight," he said. "Too warm all the way through, no cold edge to it anywhere, nothing in it that could kill you and chose not to." He did not say he missed the pack. He did not have to. It was in him the way the cold was in him, under everything permanent. It was Neu who told him, in one of those infirmary weeks, what the 31 days had been like from the other side of them, because he had never once asked, having been too busy surviving to imagine anyone grieving him, and she had never once offered, until the afternoon she did. "You want to know the worst of it," she said. She was sitting by the bed with her hands knotted in her lap, and she had the look of someone who had rehearsed a thing 100 times and was going to say it wrong anyway. "The worst of it wasn't the file. I could have fought the file. The worst of it was that I couldn't. I stood in front of the same board you'll stand in front of, a second cadet with nothing but a feeling, and I said I don't believe he's dead, and the warden had a predation report and confirmed drone imagery and 31 days of silence, and I had a spacing. A ring that looked wrong to me from a ridge in a memory. That's all I had. They were kind about it. That was the unbearable part. They were so kind. They told me grief does that, makes you see patterns, makes you argue with the arithmetic, and that the mature thing, the healthy thing, was to let you go. Her voice thinned. I almost did. I want you to know that because you keep looking at me like I'm the one who never gave up, and I nearly did, Ezra. A season of being told, gently, by everyone I respected, that the loyal thing and the sane thing were to stop. It wears you down. The only reason I got on that detail is that I decided I'd rather be wrong at your grave than right in a warm hall. That's not faith. That's just being too stubborn to be sensible. That's the whole of it, though, Ezra said. That's the exact thing. The dam went down into the storm for me because she was too much of what she was to be sensible about it. Left and right came back up the draw because they were too stubborn to run. You got on a detail you'd been told to skip because you'd rather be wrong at a grave than sensible in a hall. He reached over and put his hand on her knotted hands. You keep calling it stubborn like it's a failing. Out on the range, that's the only thing that's ever kept anything alive. The sensible ones close the file. You're not the one who never gave up because you never wanted to give up. You're the one who never gave up because you wanted to and didn't. That's worth more, not less. Any fool can hold a line that's easy to hold. She looked at him a long moment. Bunk row 9, she said thickly. I'm never going to hear the end of that hum, am I? There's a pack of apex predators 2 ranges south humming it into their whelps every winter, Ezra said. No, you are not. Nayu did not stay a second cadet long. When the doctrine came apart and the college began the slow business of rebuilding what it taught, they needed instructors who had been at Hollow 9, and there were only 4, and one of them could barely be got out of the interdicted ranges long enough to sign his own pay. So it fell to her, in the years after, she and Vess, in the third form hall, teaching the keeping song and the long stillness to children who did not yet believe a word of it, exactly the way Vess had once taught them the 3 lectures that were wrong. She was good at it. She had, after all, been the first one on that ridge to look down into a ring of the dead and know, against all the arithmetic, that it was breathing. The record did what records do when they are written all the way true. It traveled. Halleck's Sorrel's interdiction order reached the college clerks, and the clerks read the reason on it, a field warden's own hand signing his own negligence into a founding document, and the thing Halleck's had said would happen happened. He was called before the college board. He did not write it soft. He stood in the warm hall where he had signed so many files closed, and he told it as it had happened. The 9th night log and the confirmed drones and the boy who waved and the pack that kept him. And he asked for no mercy. And the board took his warden's post, because a college cannot keep a warden who has been shown to close living cadets' files. And everyone in the hall knew it, Halleck's first of all. But they did not put his name on a wall of shame, in the end, and here was the strange turn of it, because Dreve's countersignature was on the order too, and the Cull-Marshal, when the board summoned him to speak against the disgraced warden, did the opposite. He stood up in the hall and he told them about the front, and the den, and the pack that had gone to the stillness in the dark to hide a gunship crew from the thing that hunts the weather, and the boy who put his own spine in front of a hunter's rifle to save the fool who leveled it. He told them there was a stone on the range now that said beyond this stone, the pack keeps its own, and that a range Cull-Marshal of 20 years had carved his mark beneath a warden's on the order that raised it, and that if the board wanted to understand what had actually happened out in Hollow 9, they should stop reading it as a warden's crime and start reading it as the day the college finally learned something true about the range it had been dropping its children into for 100 years. Sorrel closed a file he should not have closed, Dreve said. I'll not soften that. but he also signed the truest order I've put my name to in 20 years of flying, at the cost of everything he had in front of witnesses, when he could have written it soft and kept his post. You want to take his rank, take it, but you'll not take it while I stand here and let you pretend he's the worst thing that came out of that hollow. The worst thing that came out of that hollow was the doctrine that sent me there. Fix that, and you can have all our ranks. They did not take Dreve's rank. They did, in time, fix the doctrine, though it took longer than any single hearing. And Vess kept his word. He stood up in the same third form lecture hall where he had once taught 3 things. A Sethkin does not keep, a Sethkin does not guard, a Sethkin does not form up on a man, and he told the new cadets that he had taught them wrong, all 3, for 20 years, and that he was going to spend whatever teaching he had left putting it right. He taught them the long stillness now. He taught them the keeping song. He taught them that the manuals were full of tricks because the men who wrote them had never once been all the way down where a predator could smell them, and that the only thing that had ever truly worked on the range was being what you were, all the way through, in front of a thing that could kill you. Some of them believed him. Some of them would have to go out into a reckoning and learn it the hard way, the way the boy had, because some things do not travel in a lecture hall no matter how true the telling. But the story traveled. That was the thing Vess had been right about. It traveled faster than the next bounty, and it got to the range ahead of the next fool with a gun. And that, more than the line on the map, was the wall that held. Ezra did not go back at once. The leg needed a full season to be trusted, and the college needed him to sit through the hearings and tell his part. And there was a stretch in the middle of it all where he wondered, in the small cold hours, whether the pack would even know him when he came. Whether a month of bond could survive a season of absence, whether the dam would smell an infirmary-warm, well-fed stranger cross her line and range him the way she'd ranged the warden, with no memory in it at all. He did not say this fear to anyone. He carried it the way he carried the cold. But it was there, under everything, the whole long season. The fear that he had promised a thing to an animal that did not keep promises the way a man kept them, and that he would walk down into the hollow and find only teeth. He went back in the first thaw. He went the way you go to a thing you are not sure still wants you, quietly, alone, on foot from the drop, no gunship, no crew, though Nayu had wanted to come, and Vess had wanted to come, and even Hallex, who was a warden no longer but had taken a strange new post the board had made for him, keeper of the interdicted ranges, a man who now spent his days making sure no gun crossed the lines he had drawn. Even Hallex had wanted to come. Ezra had told them no. Some things you have to do all the way down and alone, where a thing can smell that there is no one behind you, nothing to prove, no audience to perform the reunion for. If the pack was going to know him, they were going to know him, and not the crowd he brought. He walked in over the Kesh shoulder in the thin, bright cold of the first thaw, past the gray boundary stone that a season of weather had already begun to soften at the edges. Beyond this stone, the pack keeps its own, and he stood in front of it for a moment on his mended leg, and then he stepped across it, unarmed, into their range. The hollow was 2 days' walk. He took it slow, because the leg was true now but not yet strong, and because there was no hurry in it. Either they were there or they were not. Either they knew him or they did not, and walking faster would not change the answer waiting at the end of it. He slept the first night under a rock shelf, out of old habit, and lay awake a long time listening to the range breathe around him. And for the first time in a season the straightness went out of him and the cold got back under his skin where it belonged, and he slept, finally, the way he had slept in the den, all the way down. On the second day he came over the last ridge above Hollow 9 a little after midday, and he stopped at the lip of it, at the exact place where a memorial party had crested a season ago, and looked down and seen a ring of the dead that was not the dead at all, and he looked down into the bowl of the hollow, and it was empty. For a long moment Ezra stood on the ridge, and let the emptiness be what it was. Of course it was empty. It was the first thaw, The packs ranged wide in the thaw, following the herds down off the shoulder, and no den held a pack in daylight in a good season. He had known that. He had known it the whole walk-in. But knowing a thing and standing over the proof of it are two different weights, and the fear he had carried all season came up out of him then and stood in his throat. That he had come 2 days on a mended leg to keep a promise to a range that had already forgotten him. That the hollow was empty because the bond was empty. That he would call and nothing would answer, and he would have to walk back out over the shoulder and learn to live in the straight, warm corridors, with the knowledge that the best thing that had ever happened to him had been a month long and was over. He went down into the hollow anyway. He crossed to the shelf where he had denned, and it was just rock now, cold and empty, the fur and the sinew and the warmth all gone back into the range, and he sat down in the snow with his back against the stone where he had nearly died and had instead been kept, and he did the only thing left to do, which was wait, and be what he was all the way down, where anything that came could smell it. He did not call out. Calling out was a performance, and they would smell the performance. He just sat, an ordinary tired man on a mended leg in the cold, being genuinely and completely glad to be back in the one place in all the range where a thing that could kill him had chosen not to, and he let the hollow have his smell, and he waited. The wind shifted in the late afternoon downslope, carrying him out over the range, and he thought, there, if they're anywhere in a day's run, they have me now, and he waited to find out what a season had done to a bond. They came at dusk. He did not see them come. That was the thing he would tell Neu after, the thing that undid her all over again. He did not see them. He smelled them first, the deep, musky, living warmth of them rolling up the hollow ahead of the fading light, and then he heard the snow, the soft, heavy displacement of great bodies moving without hurry, and he got up onto his feet with his back against the shelf and his hands open and low, and his heart going like a drum, exactly as it had gone the first time, because a season is a long time, and he did not yet know, he could not yet know, whether what came around the shoulder of rock at the end of the hollow was going to know him or range him. The dam came first. She came around the rock into the last of the light, and she was thinner than the thaw should have left her, and there was more gray in her muzzle than a season should have put there, and Ezra's breath stopped, because she looked older, she looked like the season had cost her, and he understood, in the way you understand a thing all at once and too late, that she had spent it looking. She stopped at the edge of the shelf, and she raised her great split-eared head, and she ranged him, the way she ranged everything, patient, thorough, deciding. And for one endless moment she was just an apex predator measuring a lone man in the dusk, and the whole bond hung on the next breath. Then she went still, not the killing stillness, the other kind, the recognition kind. And she lowered her head, and she crossed the last of the snow between them, and she pressed her muzzle into his chest once and held it there. And Ezra Ross put his arms around the enormous scarred head and pressed his face into her fur and made a sound he had not made in a season. And behind her the whole pack came around the rock into the hollow, gray and left and right, and 2 half-grown yearlings who had been whelps when he left. And the bond had not emptied. The bond had waited. The bond had spent a whole season standing on a ridge watching the north sky, and it knew him. It knew him all the way down. I told you, he said into her fur, wrecked, laughing, weeping. I told you I'd smell you before I saw you. I got it backwards. You smelled me first. You always were better at it than me. And then something hit him from the side and took him off his feet. He went down in the snow under a weight that a season ago he could have lifted in 2 hands, and could not have lifted now with his whole body, because the thing that had hit him was trouble. She was not a whelp anymore. That was the first thing his stunned, laughing, breath-knocked-out mind could make of the great gray shape standing over him with its blunt head cocked, and its whole body wagging from the shoulders back like an idiot puppy that had forgotten it now outweighed him. The crevasse runt, the reason for all of it, had spent a season on the range eating what an apex predator eats and running the fronts and denning the hollows, and she had come up out of the winter nearly the size of Gray. All muscle and dense new fur, and a set of jaws that could have taken his arm to the shoulder, and she was using none of it. She was using exactly none of it. She was standing over him in the snow making the rusted hinge sound she had made as a baby, and shoving her enormous head into his chest hard enough to drive the air out of him. Over and over. Where are you? Where were you? I go where you go. That's the whole of what I know. You got big, Ezra wheezed under her, his arms as far around the great neck as they would go, which was not nearly far enough anymore. You got so big. Look at you. You're bigger than Gray, you monster, you absolute get off. You're crushing me. I mended this leg once and I'm not doing it again. And Trouble did not get off. Trouble had waited a whole season for the boy who pulled her out of the ice, and she was not getting off for anything. And Ezra Ross lay in the snow in the dusk under 150 lengthweights of apex predator that had once fit inside his jacket, and understood that he had gotten the answer to the fear he had carried all season. And the answer was that a bond does not empty. A bond deepens in the dark where you cannot watch it, the way the pack had deepened the long stillness in the dark, the way the range had grown trouble in the dark, and it comes back to you bigger than you left it, and it takes you off your feet. He stayed 3 days that first time. He denned with them under the shelf where he had nearly died, and the pack folded him back into its warmth as if the season had been a single night, and he slept all the way down, the cold back where it belonged, the enormous slow rise and fall of the packs breathing around him, and in the mornings he watched the yearlings mock hunt in the fresh snow and Trouble knock them flat, because she was twice their size and had no idea, and he learned the range with the pack the way he had learned the den. And by the 3rd day the fear he had carried all season was gone out of him for good, replaced by the simplest thing he had ever known, which was that he had 2 homes now, and one of them had a roof and the other had teeth, and both of them were his. And he was going to spend the rest of his life walking between them. On the 2nd evening, the dam took him hunting. She did not take him to hunt. He was no use to a Sethkin hunt, slow and loud and blunt-toothed. She took him along, the way you bring a whelp that is not yet good for anything but needs to learn the shape of the thing, and she set him on a rise downwind of a thaw herd and left him there, and worked the herd below with Gray and the yearlings in the failing light. And Ezra sat on the cold rise and watched an apex pack do the one thing the manuals had gotten exactly right, which was kill, and understood that the gentleness he had been given was not the opposite of that. It was the same thing, pointed the other way. The tenderness that had kept him alive under the shelf and the lethality that worked the herd below were not 2 natures in the pack. They were one nature, one enormous unhesitating capacity to spend everything it had on the thing it had chosen, and he had simply had the fortune, in a storm, to be chosen instead of hunted. He had been on both sides of that capacity now. He knew, better than any man alive, exactly how thin the line was, and exactly how completely the pack held to whichever side of it you fell on. When the dam came back up the rise to him in the dark with the herd fed on and the young ones fed, she pressed her muzzle to his chest, gentle as she had ever been, and he did not flinch from it because he understood it at last, all the way down. It was the same muzzle. It had always been the same muzzle. The wonder was never that a killer could be gentle. The wonder was that it had chosen where to be gentle and had never once in a lifetime gotten it wrong. That was the post he took in the end. The board had made Halleck's keeper of the interdicted ranges, and Halleck's, who was a warden no longer and a better man for it, had gone to the board and told them the ranges needed more than a keeper who drew lines. They needed someone who could cross the lines, someone who could walk into an interdicted hollow unarmed and be known, and come back out and tell the college the truth of what lived there. So the truth kept traveling, so the story kept getting to the range ahead of the next fool with a gun. They needed, Halleck said, a bridge. And there was exactly one person in the whole college who had ever been all the way down where a pack could smell him, and lived to come back up and say so. So Ezra Ross became the thing the range had never had, A man whose whole work was to walk unarmed across the lines that other men had drawn, and to be known on the far side of them, and to carry the truth back. He learned the other interdicted ranges the way he had learned this one, slow and honest and all the way down, and not all of them took to him. There was a canyon pack to the south that ranged him for 3 seasons before it let him stand, and a solitary old male up on the ice shelf that never did, that watched him from a distance every visit with a cold, ancient patience and never once came in, and Ezra respected that too. Because being chosen was not owed to anyone, and a thing that could kill you and chose not to was giving you a gift, not paying you a debt. But the story traveled ahead of him now, to every range, the way Vess had promised it would. The boundary stones went up one by one, each one cut with the same 2 lines and the same 2 words underneath. Beyond this stone, the pack keeps its own, the keeping song, and each one puzzled a new set of cadets into asking, and each question got the whole thing told again, and the telling was the wall, and the wall held. And once a season, in the first thaw, the college brought the new 3rd form out to the Gret Hari's shoulder, to the first stone, the oldest one, the one that had been cut from a grave marker meant for a boy who was not dead. Because the board had decided in the end that the way you taught 100 years of wrong doctrine out of an institution was not with a lecture but with a walk and a stone, and the man who was the reason for both. Ezra was there, the season the story properly ends, standing by the stone in the thin, bright cold with 24 new cadets fanned out behind him, 3rd formers, young and cocky, and full of the 3 things the manuals still have taught despite everything, because doctrine dies slower than the men who wrote it. They had heard his name. They did not quite believe his name. He could see it on them, the way they looked at the ordinary tired man on a mended leg leaning on a range staff by a weathered gray stone, and measured him against the story they'd been told and found him too plain to fit it. He was used to that. He counted on it, a little. The plainness was the whole of the lesson if they only knew it yet. "You've all had the 3 lectures," he said. "A Sethkin does not keep. A Sethkin does not guard. A Sethkin does not form up on a man. Vess still teaches them. He teaches them so he can spend the rest of the hour telling you why every one of them is wrong, but he teaches them because you have to know the wrong thing all the way before the right thing means anything." He nodded past them, out over the range to the north, to the pale shoulder where the light was failing. "I'm not going to argue the lectures with you. Arguing is a performance and you'd smell it. I'm just going to stand here a while on the far side of this stone, being what I am, and we'll see what the range decides to show you. It doesn't always show anything. That's not a trick I can turn on. Some seasons we stand here till dark and walk home cold, and you go back to the college thinking the whole thing was a story an old cripple tells to keep his post." He smiled, thin and worn and entirely calm. "And some seasons it shows you." That season it showed them. The wind had been downslope all afternoon, carrying the smell of 24 young Vareth out over the range, and Ezra had felt the odds shifting in it the way he always did now, a thing under his skin he could not have taught anyone, and so he was already watching the north shoulder when the light caught the first movement on it. He did not point. Pointing would have set the cadets off, and a startled crowd smells like prey, and he was not going to hand the pack a hollow full of prey-smelling children on the wrong side of a boundary stone. He just went very calm, all the way down, and let the cadets follow his stillness to its source. They came down off the shoulder in the last of the light, unhurried, the way they came to everything, the great gray pack of Hollow 9, thinner in the muzzle now, the dam grayer than ever but still at the point, gray off her shoulder, the range's whole long generations of yearlings and subadults ranked behind, and at the dam's flank, huge now, fully grown, a season past the biggest of them, a scarred gray female with a blunt familiar head and a way of walking that still, under all that murder, had something puppyish left in it that only one man in the range could see. The cadets came apart. Ezra heard it behind him, The sound of 24 young predators in training meeting an actual apex pack for the first time in the open with nothing but a weathered stone and a plain tired man between the indrawn breath, the scramble backward, a weapon coming half out of a harness before a hand clamped it still, the small broken sounds of the manuals failing all at once against the real thing. One cadet said, "That's a breeding group, that's a whole breeding group, sir, we have to." And another said nothing at all, just stared, mouth open, at the wall of gray coming down the snow toward the man who had not moved and would not move. They had been told the story. Not one of them had believed the story. And now the story was walking down off the shoulder at them with the low sun behind it. And every certainty they had carried out of that warm lecture hall was coming apart in the cold, exactly the way Halix's had, and Vess's, and Dreve's in this same hollow, a lifetime ago. "Nobody move," Ezra said, quiet, not turning. "Nobody raise a thing, they're not for you. Watch." The pack reached the boundary stone and stopped. They stopped at the line, at the gray stone with its 2 cut lines, on their own side of it, because it was their range and they knew its edge the way they knew everything. And they did not cross it toward the crowd of strangers, and they did not have to. The dam raised her great split-eared head over the stone and looked across it, past the man, at the 24 young Varith frozen in the snow, and she ranged them, all of them, one long patient sweep, deciding, as she had decided about a warden and a marshal and a whole gunship crew, exactly how much she was willing to allow. And then she looked at the man on the far side of the stone, the ordinary tired man leaning on his staff, and the whole terrible weight went out of her, and she made a low sound, a single note, down at the floor of hearing. And Ezra Ross stepped across the stone, onto their side of it, unarmed into the range, and the pack folded around him. They came in around him the way they had come in around him a lifetime ago in a ring in the snow, the dam pressing her muzzle to his chest, Gray shouldering in against his leg, the yearlings crowding, and trouble, enormous, ridiculous, joyful trouble driving her great head into his ribs hard enough to stagger him, so that the last thing the new third form of the Kesh Reach Warkaledge saw, in the failing light, on the far side of a stone that said beyond this stone, the pack KEEPS its own, was the plainest man any of them had ever laid eyes on, standing calm and unafraid and entirely at home in the middle of a pack of apex predators that had, by every doctrine they had ever been taught, no reason on the range to do anything but kill him, and that were, instead, pressing in around him in the cold like a family, closing around the one it had been waiting for. They walked the new cadets home in the dark, and not one of them said a word for the first hour of it, and Ezra let the silence do what no lecture ever could. Somewhere in that silence, he knew, 24 young Varith were taking the 3 lectures they had carried out of the warm hall and setting them down in the snow for good, and picking up the only thing that had ever been true, that the range did not answer to tricks or to guns or to doctrine, that it answered to what you were, all the way down, where a thing that could kill you could smell it. Some of them would remember it when it mattered. One of them, 3 seasons on, would go dark in a front on a far range and be found alive 9 days later in a den, thin and kept, and the warden who found her would not close the file, would not sign the report, would know, because the story had gotten to her ahead of the storm. But that was a season Ezra would not see the start of, and it is another telling, and the range is full of them now, which was the whole point of the stone. The dam died 2 winters later. She died the way an old apex dies, out on her own range in her own time, and Ezra was not there for it, and he was glad in the end that he was not, because the last he had of her was not a body in the snow but her gray muzzle pressed to his chest in the dusk, that single low note, the weight of a whole season of waiting going out of her when she crossed the last of the snow and let him hold her scarred old head one more time. Grief came for him the way the cold came, under everything, and he let it, and he did not dress it up as doctrine or as anything else. He had learned that from her too. You do not run from the hard thing. You stand in it still, and let it pass over the top of you, and you come out the far side and go on, because there are young ones behind you who still need the warmth. Trouble was the dam now. The crevasse runt, the reason for all of it, the baby that had fit inside a boy's jacket and grown into the biggest thing on the range. She held the point of the pack now, and she had whelps of her own, and Ezra had watched her teach them the long stillness in a ring in the snow around a fallen yearling one hard winter, watched her spend her own breath to hide her own young from the thing that hunts the fronts, and he had understood, watching, that the thing he had been given a lifetime ago in a storm was not a month, and was not a bond, and was not even a pack. It was a place in a line that ran back before the mountain and would run on after him, a place at the warm center of a ring of the living pretending to be the dead, so that what mattered would make it through the dark. He is not young anymore, the man who walks between the two homes. The leg that the mountain broke and the college mended aches in the cold now, and the range staff he once carried for show he carries for true, and the new cadets who come out to the first stone each thaw look at him and find him even plainer than their fathers found him, an old cripple by a weathered rock, too worn to fit the story. He counts on it still. The plainness was always the whole of the lesson. And once a season, when the wind is right and the range decides to show them, the pack comes down off the shoulder in the failing light, trouble gray in the muzzle now herself, her own grown young rank behind her, and they stop at the stone that says the pack keeps its own, and they range the frightened children on the far side of it. And then the old man steps across the line into the range, unarmed, calm, at home, and they fold in around him in the cold. And every season the same thing happens to the cadets that happened to a memorial party a lifetime ago on that same ridge. They arrive certain of what a Sethkin is, and what a human is, and what the range allows, and they stand there in the dusk and watch every certainty come apart. And they learn the one thing the mountain has to teach, which the manuals will never hold and the lectures will never carry, and only a stone and a plain old man, and a pack of apex predators keeping their own can ever truly say. They came to bury him once and found him kept. And the pack that had lain a month in the snow playing dead to hold what was theirs got up, in the end, in front of everyone, and never once played dead again. Because the thing they had been hiding was safe now, and known, and home, and there was nothing left in all the range worth holding their breath against.